Musilo Michaelina Motepu.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I do not.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, we're using bundle 14, bracket B.
14B.
14B.
Yeah, okay.
Exhibit U32.
Yeah. It was already admitted. I think it was.
It was admitted as U32.1.
Yeah.
Correct, Chairperson. Ms. Motepu, you have.
Are there legal representatives who need to be placed on record? No.
Yes, I think that, yes. Thank you, Chair, for reminding me. I think the thing is making noise for me
Oh,
now.
the Eskom.
Yes.
I think the Reverend keeps on pushing it down our throats, even if there is only one person who wants it here. I think that he is more persuaded by her arguments than ours.
Yes. Ms. Motepu is indeed legally represented, and I will ask Mr. Daniel Witz to place himself on the record.
Okay, and you may do so from where you are, but you would have to switch on the mic.
Chair, I confirm my representation of Ms. Motepu.
Yes, okay, just mention the name for the record.
It's Daniel Witz of Witz Inc. Attorneys, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Ms. Motepu, your affidavit is on that bundle, in that bundle, Eskom bundle 14B. It starts on page 570. Now, you are familiar with the page numbers here.
So are we using the black
Use
or
the
the
black
red?
ones.
Always the black.
Thank you.
You have it.
I have it in front of me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Motepu, Chair, I've spoken to Ms. Motepu. This is the approach. Ms. Motepu, you've heard my summation to the chairperson of your evidence. How you became employed by Regiments. When was this? Who approaches you for this employment? And what are you told about Regiments? So let's start there. And
Just in case she has some nerves, but I would imagine that they are better today than last time.
Much better. Thank you.
I think that will help her to relax. Then you can start
break
asking
the
her.
ice, chairperson. Yeah. And always address the chairperson.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, let's
May I start?
there.
Thank you. By way of background and context, Chairperson, I was employed at Regiments in 2007 up until 2010. If you recall my last testimony.
You say 2007?
And 7 up until 2010. If you recall my last testimony in December. And then I left in December 2010 to go to Transaction Capital and then eventually KPMG. So sometime in May 2015, while I was an associate director at KPMG, I was called by Eric Wood, who was a director of Regiments Capital and also one of the 3 shareholders. He called me actually and Deboho Leballo at the same day, and he wanted us to meet for coffee. And we met for coffee at Oakland's at a coffee shop called Europa. And he essentially told me about the growth of Regiments Capital. When I left, there were 50 people. Now they had 250 people within the employer. They were working with McKinsey. At that time, McKinsey was one of the best reputable consultancy firm globally. And also what he expanded on was that they have all the, what I call the blue chip public sector clients in the Department of Public Enterprise. Namely, they were working on Denel, they were working on SA Express. They had previously worked with McKinsey at SAA, and they were working with McKinsey at Transnet on the 1064 locomotive transaction as financial advisors. And so he told me that they wanted a senior resource, which they had identified I should be the candidate, because I had worked with them previously and they knew what I was capable of. And Eric essentially went on to say that they want to duplicate the work that they did at Transnet to Eskom. So if you recall the contracting of McKinsey and Regiments at Transnet, it was via confinement, and McKinsey were the lead contractors, and then Regiments was the subcontractor, supply development partners. So they wanted to duplicate that model from Transnet and take it into Eskom.
So just before you move on, tell the chairperson, how did Mr. Eric Wood, or is it Dr. Eric Wood, know you?
At the time, he was still Mr. Eric Wood, but now he's Dr. Eric Wood.
Yes, how did he know you in order to contact you?
Remember, I had worked there previously at Regiments, and in the 3 to 4 years that I was there, I worked primarily with him.
I see.
Yes, so he knew what I was technically capable of and my work ethic.
I see. So, what, you have this meeting with him, with Mr. Tebogo Leballo?
Yes, it was quite interesting because after my coffee with
Yes.
Eric, Mr. Leballo called me, and I didn't even greet him. I asked him, did Eric just call you too? And then we laughed, and he said, yes, he wants me to go back to Regiments. Mr. Leballo also worked at Regiments during the same period that I did, and Eric also requested him to return. Yes. So I started working on the 15th of June, 2015. And the first thing Eric gave me, he asked Mr. Mohammed.
This is now, when you say you started on the 15th of June, this is now working for Trillian.
Pardon?
You said you started working, I think you said on the 15th of June.
Yes, we started working on the 15th of June. If you recall,
2015.
2015. If you recall, our coffee was in May.
Oh, that was
2015.
Regiments.
Yes, at Regiments.
Oh, yeah.
So I was employed as
Trillian was to come in 2016.
Yes, Mr. Chairperson.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So we spent I think a week or two going through my remuneration and the sign-on bonus.
But just before you get there, let's go back to the telephone call. I know you testified about this earlier, but there's lots of evidence that we are hearing.
Yes.
Dr. Wood gave you a call, and he asked that you go and have coffee. Or he said already in the telephone conversation that he wanted you to come back.
Yes, he did indicate that he wants to discuss an opportunity at Regiments.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so I went to that coffee knowing what was on the agenda.
And that call would have been round about when?
May
May 2015.
15, correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairperson.
And how soon after that call did you have the meeting or coffee with him and Mr. Leballo?
I think a week or two lapsed, and then we had the coffee.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and at that meeting over coffee, the discussion was that he would like both of you to come back to Regiments.
We only talked about myself,
Yeah.
but remember when
Was
Eric...
it the two of you, or was
It was
Mr.
just the
Leballo
two
not
of
there?
us.
Or it was the two of you? or-
If you go to the May call, he had told me that there is an opportunity. And then before we had coffee a few weeks after, that's within 5 minutes of Eric dropping the phone, I got a call from Mr. Lebalo. And then that's when I said, did Eric just call you as well? Yes, but when we had the coffee, we only spoke about myself,
It was
but,
just the two
but
of you.
Eric did indicate that he's also reached out to Deboho Lebalo, Mr. Lebalo, and
Okay.
he's also trying to negotiate his return as well.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Remember, either was Mr. Wood, Dr. Wood, and Mr. Lebalo.
Pardon?
Remember, it's Mr. Wood, Dr. Wood, and Mr. Lebalo.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for the correction. I
Miss-
think it's a bit confusing because in our office, we,
Yeah, you are
we used to
used
call
to
each other on that
first
first name.
name, yeah.
But I
Yeah,
take the
that's right.
correction. Thank you.
Ms. Mtepi, I think you did testify, but the chairperson wanted to know whether when you met for coffee, was it the three of you?
No, it was just the two of us. It was Mr. Wood and myself.
Okay. So he makes an offer to you.
So he makes an offer, and it was very generous. At KPMG, I think I was on 1.3 million. Then he raised it to 1.75 million and a 500,000 rand sign-on bonus. So he really wanted me to, to join.
It's quite clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started on the Monday, the 15th. I think it was a Thursday because the 16th was a Friday, which was June 16th. So the first document that he asked, Mr. Wood asked Mr. Mohammed Bobat to send me was a draft proposal which Mackenzie and Regiments had sent to Eskom round about April, March 2015. And it had Mackenzie's master service agreement top program and the cost savings initiative, but also it also had Regiment's financial lag, if I can call it, called balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking initiatives. So he wanted me to essentially climatize myself with the proposal that they had sent, but he didn't tell me who it was sent to at Eskom. Yeah, so I spent the first week or so just going through the proposal and asking questions with regards to if I can get more information about it. So at the time...
Sorry, Ms. Mtepi. Regiments, what services or company of the sort was Regiments?
Regiments were, I can say was because I think they've gone into liquidation.
Yeah,
They were a financial services company, but they had various divisions. You had Regiments Properties, which dealt with properties. If you recall, if you've been watching the media, they had bought some property above the Gautrain station to build a mixed-use development. I think that is subject to litigation. They had Regiment's Fund Management, and they had the Transnet Pension Fund was one of their clients, and the City of Joburg Sinking Fund was also one of their clients. They had Regiment's Advisory, and it was split into two, management consulting and financial advisory. So I was a principal in the financial advisory. And then it had Regiment Securities, where they traded bonds and financial instruments, just like derivatives, on behalf of the Transnet Pension Fund and the City of Joburg Sinking Fund.
Yeah. So you were appointed into the position principal at the Division Financial Advisory.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So then your evidence has to be understood in that context. When you're dealing with a proposal that you have been asked to look at, which had been submitted to Eskom, it will deal with financial matters.
That's correct. If we go to my paragraph 16 of my affidavit,
16.
16,
Yes.
So as I said, Mackenzie was the main contractor under the master service agreement, which included cost savings on procurement, generation, primary energy, and the establishment of the top engineers program. Now, it was envisioned that Mackenzie would be given 70% of the fees that would be paid, and as the supply development partners, Regiments would get 30%. Ms. Goodson this was her area, she will elaborate once, I think she's due to testify after myself. And then there was Regiment's financial work stream, if I can call it that. And it was called balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking activities. Because we were a financial advisory firm, we took the lead. So that was the leg that I led. And where we would get 95% of the fee, and Mackenzie would get 5% of the just administrative fee, because it was envisioned that Eskom would pay Mackenzie and then Mackenzie would pay Regiments. So they charged 5% administration fee.
Yeah, so that proposal you've referred to earlier, does it relate to this balance optimization and cash unlocking initiatives?
Yes, let me just give you a background and context where Eskom was at the time, so that you can see why there was a need of balance sheet optimization. At the time, if you recall, Mr. Chair, Eskom had liquidity concerns. Its balance sheet was heavily in debt, and they were struggling to collect revenue. On top of that, the credit rating agencies, Fitch Ratings, Moody's, and Standard & Poor, because if you recall, after the suspension of the 4 executives, they were downgraded. And the new build there was a lot of delays and cost overruns. Eskom, I think they had a funding deficit of something like 50 billion a year. So what this balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking initiatives essentially says, let's look at Eskom's balance sheet. How do we now use this? Where are the low-hanging fruits? Where's the fat in this balance sheet? So they had identified these initiatives that may essentially unlock cash because of their liquidity constraints, but also one of the requirements of the cash injection from the sovereign, which was I think 400 million rand or 400 million, was that they had to sell non-core assets from their balance sheet. And one of Eskom's non-core assets was a company called Eskom Finance Corporation, where essentially it was a company that provided mortgages to the Eskom employees. Hence, it was not a core asset, so they needed to sell that. So I will just go to
yes, my question,
18. Yes.
My question was the proposal you referred to earlier related to that balance sheet optimization.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was on the Regiment server,
Yeah.
and I only had access to Trillian server. And, yeah.
Okay, that's all right. Regiments at the time with McKinsey was rendering services to Transnet.
That's right. Yes,
Yes.
I was. So they were continuing on the club loan. So I led the club loan. I'll give you more information as I close. And then also, because of the forecasts were overly optimistic at Transnet. So they had ordered 1,064 locomotives, and the forecast was a positive economic trajectory. But we know that the commodity market fell, so as Transnet had all these trains that were ordered, they had incurred debt, but the volumes and the customers were not going to be there. So it's quite interesting that the same people, the same consultants who worked on the forecasts of the business plan were the same consultants that were asked to assist us in the same cash optimization and unlocking, cash unlocking opportunities. So
And these same consultants, that's McKinsey
it was the
and
same
Regiments.
consultants. So they were the one who worked on the business plan, and Regiments assisted them with the China Development Bank loan and the club loan. And now they had to backtrack and say, we were overly ambitious in the forecast. How do we now find fat in the balance sheet so that we don't incur further debt and to the detriment of the credit rating?
Yes. Now, please tell the chairperson, you have this proposal you have been given, which is a proposal you say was submitted to Eskom, but first listen to my question. So I think you need to tell the chairperson what develops after that, and particularly in relation to that proposal to Eskom. How do you engage Eskom going forward, and who do you engage with at Eskom? And tell the chairperson.
Thank you. So before I go into the transaction, Mr. Anuj Singh had been seconded from Transnet, and he was seconded to Eskom as the Chief Financial Officer. So
Sorry, you are in June 2015.
So we're now in June, and I remember the first time I formally met Mr. Singh was in Maboning.
Yeah, but in June 2015...
I'm sorry, where was it where you first met him?
It was in a conference facility center at Maboning. So he had been seconded at Eskom, and he was working with Regiments and McKinsey on his first 100 days. So essentially, Regiments and McKinsey were assisting him with regards to what does he have to accomplish in the first 100 days of his appointment. And we also assisted him with the funding plan. And so we met at various venues. So the first one is at Maboning, and the other one was in the airports. There's a hotel by the OR Tambo Airport, so we used those facilities as well. And then the other facility was in a boutique hotel on Ravona Boulevard. Now, it was quite interesting. If we go to... Just give me a minute so I can get the reference. Mr. Advocate, if you can just help me find that paragraph that has the dates where we met and the various
look at
venues.
paragraph 22, page 574, Chairperson. And you need to clarify to the Chairperson whether these meetings were before or after his secondment.
Okay, so I'm not sure when he was seconded, but when I arrived on the 15th, he had already been seconded, but it was before he was officially appointed as the Eskom chief executive, Eskom's financial officer, chief financial officer. So specifically...
do you mean that at that time, he may have been acting CFO or acting financial director as opposed to having been permanently appointed at Eskom?
Yes, if I recall, Minister Lim Brown made an announcement in October 2015 that he was appointed a permanent CFO of Eskom.
Yes.
So we met, if we go to paragraph 22, We met
You
on
met
the
in-
8th of
in
July, 2015. So Mackenzie used to book the venues, and we used to work together with Mackenzie, which was myself, Mohammed Bobat, and the advisory team. And then so one meeting was on the 8th of July, 2015. And then the other meeting was on the 24th of July, 2015. So these are the only two that I could find on in my documents, but there were many others that I couldn't find. And what's interesting, Mr. Chairperson, is that it was called Project Pandora. And when the meeting invites were sent by email, the CFO was not emailed.
When you say the CFO, you mean
Mr. Anuj was not emailed. He was contacted telephonically.
Oh,
Yes,
and everybody else was emailed.
yes.
Okay.
But I suspect because he did not have an Eskom email address, I'm not sure. But there was quite a secrecy because it was called Project Pandora,
Yes.
like
and
Pandora's box.
who had come up with his name? Do you know?
No, I think they came up with it before I
When
I
you
joined.
came,
It was already there.
known as
Yes.
Project Pandora.
correct.
Okay.
So let's have
And just basically, that was the project of doing what?
that was what I've just outlined.
Just wanted
The master
to
service.
kind of summarize
Yes,
it in a
the
sentence
master
or two.
service agreement, where they looked at cost savings initiatives on procurement, on generation, and establishing the engineers' top program. And then on the financial side, the initiatives that would optimize their balance sheet and unlock cash. So essentially,
Yes.
all of that, the code name
Yeah.
was Project Pandora.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, did you get a sense, did you get the sense in mid-June when you started at Regiments that this Project Pandora had been around for quite some time, or did you get the sense it was a new thing?
I got the sense it had been around for quite some time, because if you recall my earlier evidence, they had already submitted a proposal in April, March 2015.
Yes.
And Mackenzie and Regiments already knew and had information on Eskom.
Yes.
That's why they were able to assist him on what his priorities will be on the first 100 days, what Eskom's challenges were. So Anuj would give us information like minutes from the finance and investment committees. He would give us copies of the credit rating reports. He would give us any information that we could assist him with. So I think I got there in the middle of it.
Okay.
Just to,
Okay, 1 second.
yes.
It would be important to establish how far back this Project Pandora had been initiated in relation to June, mid-June, when Ms. Muchepo started at Regiments. The reason why it might be important to establish that is that it may well be that it would reflect that it's a plan which preceded the suspension of the executives, and that it may well be that its execution would require that certain key positions at Eskom be occupied by persons that the people who were driving Project Pandora knew would play along in order to ensure the success of, among other things, Project Pandora.
Yes.
So it's important
Yes,
to check that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Mr. Chair, from the evidence that I've seen previously, I got the sense that Anuj knew that he will eventually be appointed permanent. Sorry,
Who is that?
Mr. Anuj Singh.
Yeah.
The fact that we were planning his first 100 days,
Yes,
in his mind, and our understanding was that he is going to be appointed permanently.
yes,
So there
okay.
was, it was never a sense that I'm just
Yeah, temporarily.
temporarily and then I'm
Yes.
going back to Transnet.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. No, I think that would be consistent with logic in
So,
to
I'll-
anyone who has listened to what I've listened to. Yes, okay, all right.
I would like to take you to annexure, I think it's 14/588.2.
I'm sorry, what is the page number?
At the top of the page.
The black numbers, it's 14 slash. Oh, okay. 588.2. Correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes,
So if you look at the subject, it's invitation, Project Pandora, discussion with CFO. July 8th, 8 o'clock. And venue to be confirmed.
you are too fast because you know
Apologies.
the document. Okay, invitation at the top.
Yes.
Project Pandora discussion with
With-
CFO, July 8, 8 o'clock in the morning. Location venue TPC. Okay, and this is what's start on 7 August 2015.
I
That's
think
when-
it's the 7th of July, 2015. It was July.
Or do you mean 8th of July?
July is the 7th? Yeah, sorry, the 8th of July, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, the 8th of July.
Okay,
And
yes, okay, right.
and then showtime so it's Wednesday, 8th of July at 1 o'clock. So it was scheduled from 8 a.m. to 1 o'clock.
Oh, that's quite a long time.
Yes. So this venue to be confirmed, it was either at the Maboning conference facility or the airport hotel conference facility or the boutique hotel in Ravonia's conference facility. I don't remember. And then if you go to the next page,
Well, before you go to the next page,
Okay.
let's finish with it. It was sent on the 3rd of July 2015, isn't it?
that's correct.
Who was it sent by?
It was sent by Mackenzie. The organizer was,
Chomu Botse
yes.
Waribe.
Yes, he always organized the meetings of Mackenzie.
Tumo Ibutsi.
Yes, and if you see in all the invitations, Mr. Singh is not there, but on the subject, you can see it's discussion
Yes.
with CFO.
Yes.
So there was a little bit of
Some
secrecy.
Yes.
Now that in high insight,
Or you mean you didn't appreciate it then?
yes,
Okay.
that's correct, Mr. Chairperson. And then if
Yes.
we go, are you ready to proceed to the next one?
Yeah, you can go to the next one.
So it's page 588.3. So this one is the subject. Are you there?
Yeah, the subject is the same, isn't it?
Yes, invitation, Project Pandora, discussion with CFO. This is now the 24th of July, 1 o'clock p.m., venue to And then it's location, venue to be confirmed. This time it's started at 1 p.m. and it ended at 6 p.m.
Any significance to the reference to showtime?
I think, no, this is just a printout of my invitation, of my emails.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay. So was it issued by the same person as the previous one?
yes, he always organized the meetings.
Okay.
So
So
these-
this would have been a follow-up from the previous one?
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes, okay.
Did the meeting, I see the show time is indicated as tentative on both emails. Did these meetings actually take place?
Yes, these meetings did take place.
Did take place?
Yes,
Do you know what TBC stands for?
to be confirmed.
To be confirmed?
Yes.
Or venue to be confirmed?
Correct.
I see.
Remember, it was either Maboneng or the airport hotel venue, or it was the boutique hotel in Rivonia.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And when the meetings did take place, was Mr. Arnold Singh present?
Yes, Mr. Nursing was present. He was the key figure of the meetings. As I said previously, he essentially told us what kept him up at night.
Well, before you do that, let's separate between the two. Let's talk about what was discussed at the first one, and then you can move to the second one.
The first one
That's
was,
the one on the 8th.
yes,
of
I
July.
think it was his first 100 days. And because I was new, this is just from memory, he was not impressed with Mackenzie and Regiments. So I think he interrupted the presentation, I think within 10 minutes. And then you asked about his participation. He took a pen and he said, no, it's quite obvious that Mackenzie and Regiments don't understand Eskom. It's quite obvious that they don't understand the key challenges he has to face. So he essentially, on a whiteboard, put, these are the things that are keeping me up at night. So I want you to focus on what solutions to these problems. So he completely scrapped the presentation. Yeah, it's like your primary school teacher saying, you can do better, see me. So we took notes, and I think he gave us 2 weeks or a month to essentially work on the points that he had provided us. We asked for additional information, hence he gave us credit rating reports, he gave us minutes of the Finance and Investment Committee meetings, and any other relevant documentation.
Is that of Eskom?
Of Eskom, that's correct.
So this time he's still at Transnet
He's still at Transnet, yes.
and he's able to provide you with information.
He's seconded.
He
at
couldn't
Eskom.
have been at Transnet.
He's seconded
He
to
had been
Eskom.
seconded to
Yes,
Eskom,
yes.
and he probably was acting CFO at that time.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson,
Yeah.
because at Transnet, the acting CFO was Mr. Gary Peter. Yes.
Okay, Chair. I thought the secondment was in August 2015, but I will check.
But you must check, but my impression was that he was brought to Eskom about a month or two after Mr. Brian first started there. But I could be wrong.
I will check that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll check.
Yeah, so that he was acting CFO of
FO.
Eskom in June or July, in July 2015
15.
is subject to being checked. But if he was not at Eskom in July, when he had these two meetings, he was still at Transnet, but already having these meetings discussing Eskom matters. That would be quite interesting.
I think we need to just get an official date when he was officially seconded.
Yeah, somebody should be able to check quickly. Maybe Mr. Legas Jr. could try and check that. We can continue in the meantime.
So, and then there was another meeting, the 24th of July. There we
So to complete the picture in regard to the first meeting, 8 July 2015, you are saying that a presentation had been prepared by Mackenzie and Regiments, or
Yes.
Mackenzie only,
Mackenzie and Regiments.
and Regiments. Or was it one presentation to be presented by one person, or Mackenzie would present their own and Regiments their own?
It would be Mackenzie would present their part, that portion of the presentation,
Yeah.
and Regiments would present that
Another
portion.
portion,
Remember, their supply development.
Yes, yeah.
So it would give the
Their
subcontractor skills also to present in front of the client
Yeah.
and to lead some
And you
some
say
transactions.
he was not happy with their presentations.
He was not happy at all.
And he basically said, let's start
Stop,
afresh.
yes.
Stop. These are the issues that are keeping me awake at night. But if you are saying they were keeping him awake, that seems to be consistent with him being at Eskom.
Yes, he was seconded to Eskom, but I'm not sure if it was official. That's my uncertainty, because
Yeah, but you remember that he spoke on the basis that at that time, these were Eskom issues that were keeping him awake at night.
that's correct.
That's how he spoke.
That's correct, Mr. Chirpers. Plus, on the other side, I was also involved with Transnet, and we were meeting Mr. Gary Peter as the acting CFO.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So if that is factually true, then he probably was acting CFO at Eskom.
Yes, he was
Yeah.
acting.
Yeah, but they'll just, somebody will double check.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, then how did that meeting end, the first one?
The
On the
first
8th of
meeting, he gave us 2 weeks or a month to
To go and do your
go
homework?
and do our homework and
Yes.
come back to him.
Yes, and then there was then the next meeting of Project Pandora
Correct, on the 24th?
on the 24th of July.
Yes.
And I guess this was the occasion when then Regiments and Mackenzie were given a chance to make presentations and show that they understood
Yes.
what they were told they should deal with.
Yes, and I remember this meeting was at the airport,
Oh, it was at the
hotel.
airport.
Now, yes, now I recall that meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, talk about the content of that discussion so far as you can remember.
So-
Obviously, only the main features.
So the meeting went better than the first meeting because we had had time to do our homework, and he had given us the information.
So these students learn faster.
Yes. So we learned fast, and I think we had identified, some key points that keep him up at night, and we had prioritized them. And one of them was the funding plan.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you just to make sure. Would it be correct to say the context of the discussion at the first meeting of Project Pandora was that he was saying to Regiments and Mackenzie, these are the serious challenges that I'm faced with at Eskom. You people must go away, do your homework, and come back and tell me how you can help solve these problems. Is that a fair comment?
That's exactly right, Mr. Chairperson. And he
Yes.
wanted those low-hanging fruits so that when he's finally appointed,
Yeah.
he shines in the first 100 days. He can say, this is what I've accomplished in such a short period of time.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
okay. But are you saying that because he did say that himself at the meeting, or
Yes,
he said that at
absolutely,
the meeting?
absolutely, because he wanted that 100-day plan. He wanted to prioritize which
Yeah.
key areas that he wants to focus on, and those low-hanging fruits that he can essentially implement,
Yeah.
so that at least he has a good track record
Yes.
in his first 100 days.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Now you were on at the second meeting, then the McKinsey and Regiments made their presentations.
Yes, we
The
made,
meeting went much better than the first one.
yes, it went much better.
Yeah, continue.
Yes, so we took him through the presentation, and we also took him through the funding plan. Eskom, I think they had a funding deficit of between 70 and 80 billion a year. So I recall it was Eric Wood and Mr. Tedros Gabe Selassie and his team, which had Swana and Justin Kubal, and they presented the funding plan. Once again, Mr. Singh was not happy, and he interrupted the presentation by Regiments. At this time, I was still just an observer, and he said, we haven't shown him anything new, there's nothing innovative, there's no out-of-the-box thinking. His treasury can do it, why should he pay us to do what his treasury can do? So,
I thought he was a soft-spoken man.
pardon?
I thought he was a soft-spoken man.
Oh, no, he's not. Definitely not. So he interrupted that presentation, and once again, there were certain things. Because Eskom essentially is a state-owned company, it can only issue bonds in rands, in euros, in dollars. It can go to the development finance institutions. It can go to the banks. So it doesn't have. It can't issue equity on the stock exchange. So there's only a few instruments that it can use when it raises debt. So for him to say it's not innovative, the PFMA is quite, it dictates what you can and cannot do. So we had to stop. The next meeting was at Rivonia. I don't have the invitation to that.
So you, at the second meeting, did it end on the basis that McKinsey and Regiments had not impressed him?
Yes, on the funding plan.
In terms of the final plan?
Yes.
He didn't think that you came up with anything that his Treasury Department couldn't come up with?
That's correct.
Yes. So it ended on the basis that there would be another meeting later?
Yes, he also told us what key features he wanted to see on this funding plan. And I think an important point was Eskom has a 350 billion rand government guarantee. So he wanted to find out how much have we used in terms of that guarantee. And he wanted to see a five-year profile, which loans are going to be paid off that will make room so that we can raise more debt. Because I think Eskom had, it had issued almost 300 billion rand. So it had something like 60 billion rand left of the guarantee. So he wanted a profile, probably 5 years, 10 years, to see which loans will be repaid now to have room for the new loans. We had not put that in our funding plan. So we spent, I think, 2 weeks getting information from Mr. Singh, and there was a subsequent meeting at Rivonia in a boutique hotel, and we presented the amended funding plan, and he was happy with it. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Motepu, there seems to have been various plans for him. Is the funding plan also part of the first 100 days plan at Eskom?
Yes,
Or
it
are
it
there
was.
various plans?
It was because Eskom has to submit a corporate plan to the
Yes,
shareholder.
Yes.
And so it's a corporate plan, which is a strategic document. But of course, with strategy, how are you going to fund it? So with it, there's a funding plan.
Yes, that's
Yes.
why I wanted to, so that you can explain the distinction to the chairperson. The corporate plan is what Eskom needed to submit. You say to who?
To the shareholder, the Department of Public Enterprise and National Treasury.
Okay. Part of the corporate plan is a funding plan.
That's correct.
You were tasked to work on the funding plan,
That's correct.
which will be part of the corporate plan.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Did you also have to work on the corporate plan?
I only worked on the funding plan. I think Ms. Goodson will testify if she assisted.
You
But
don't
no,
know.
she would not have, because she only started
In March.
work in November 2015. So I suspect it was Mr. Mohammed Bobat and Mr. John Rousseau,
Okay,
who
so
were in Regiments management consulting, who maybe would have worked with Mackenzie on the corporate plan.
You personally don't know.
I personally do not know.
Okay, Chairperson, in regard to the date of the secondment, in his submission, written submission to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, Mr. Singh writes, I assumed my role as CFO of Eskom on 1 August 2015 on a secondment from Transnet.
Oh, that's interesting. And I guess that date has to be correct. He should know when he is added at Eskom, which therefore would mean that in July he was meeting you on Project Pandora while he was at Transnet and not when he was at Eskom.
It appears so, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay.
Looking at your affidavit, we see, well, let me build into this. There's the first meeting, the second meeting, the third meeting. You are being asked to make a proposal plans to Mr.
I'm sorry, Mr. Silega. Were you able to get an idea at the meeting of the 8th of July 2015 of Project Pandora whether Mr. Singh was attending such a meeting for the first time, or did you get any impression that this Project Pandora was something that he and the others may have been involved in for some time?
I got the impression that he had met with Mackenzie and Regiments previously, because if you recall, they presented to him, and he wasn't happy with their presentation. So I got the impression that they had met previously. They discussed what he wanted to see at that meeting before. So it was not a kickoff meeting.
Yeah, where did you get the information that he had met with Mackenzie prior to the 8th of July 2015?
Because in the presentation, it was like Mackenzie already knew Eskom, and they had information about Eskom and Regiments as well. So it was not a kickoff meeting where they say, hello, this is Mr. Singh, and I want you guys to assist me with XYZ. The fact that when I arrived at that meeting, Mackenzie was already presenting to the CFO, I got the sense that there were previous engagements before then.
Or at any rate, the invitation to that meeting was a discussion with the CFO.
Correct.
But You say the context of the discussion made you believe that he was not meeting them for the first time about this project.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson. Plus, about 2 days before the actual meetings, Mackenzie would send the slides, and then we would also incorporate our slides, and then so that they are consolidated, and then they would print. So when I read Mackenzie's submission, it was very, very clear that they had inside information with regards to Eskom, and it was not just a desktop
Yes.
analysis that was
Yeah.
very shallow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair.
Plus, they were very familiar with each other.
Oh, is that so?
Yes, so it was quite evident that
They knew one another.
that's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay.
What we haven't asked you, and it might be important to the chairperson, from Regiments' side, apart from yourself, who else was there?
Okay. It was Mr. Mohammed Bobat, Bobat, before he was seconded to National Treasury. It was Mr. Tedros Ghaib Salasi. It was myself. It was Eric Wood. It was an analyst called Justin Kobal, and a transactor called Nswane Mwangu. So that's on paragraph 23.
Yeah.
From Mackenzie's side was Mr. Vikas Sega, who was a partner. Lawrence, that's a German surname which I can't pronounce.
I think it's fine, Regiments.
No, this was Mackenzie, and then
Yeah,
it was Dr. Alex Weiss. So they were both Germans, and Mr. Vikas Saga, who was, so they were both, all three of them were partners.
Yeah. So to be clear from your testimony, this meeting's taking place in July. They are not taking place at Eskom offices.
No, not at all. They took place in venues that I have outlined,
Private venues.
private venues.
Did you ever have to meet at Eskom at any point with Mr. Singh?
No, if I just fast forward my evidence, we only started meeting at Eskom after October, when he was officially appointed as the CFO by Minister Lynn Brown. That's when we started going to Eskom.
Yes. So it's again the same, is it again the same team or personnel from Regiments?
It's exactly the same team from Regiments, and it's exactly the same team from Mackenzie.
Meeting with Mr. Anod Singh at Eskom.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairperson. Before we go in there, can I take you back to paragraph 18? I just want to take the chair just to outline the initiatives that we had proposed, but I'll go into a little bit more detail later on.
Yes.
So it was
What page do you want us to go to?
573, paragraph 18.
All right.
So it's, if you go to 18.1, so insurance claims management for the Duva Unit 3 recovery project. 18.2, rebuild Duva Unit 3 recovery project to recover 600 megawatt capacity loss. Online vending, I think there was some online vending evidence yesterday. 18.4, optimization of fiber optic cable capacity. 18.5, insurance claims management in relation to the Hitachi settlement offer. 18.6, SCAP capital structure optimization. 18.7, overall insurance claims management. 18.8, arrangements and negotiations of long-term facilities. 18.9, arrangements and negotiation of working capital facilities. 18.10, sale of Eskom finance company business and mortgage book. And if you recall, Mr. Chairperson, hybrid issuance 18.11 from last year, the hybrid
yes,
capital
yes,
issuance.
Yes.
Yes, there it is again.
Yes, yes, I remember that. Now, were these elements of Project Pandora?
These were elements of Project Pandora. And I think I made a mistake here because some of these initiatives were added later. So by Mr. Machala Koko and Mr. Anuj Singh. So you may find that the original proposal had fewer initiatives, but I think I based on what I had, and if you recall, I don't have the original proposal, but my testimony going forward, I'll let you know which ones were added on by Mr. Koko and Mr. Singh. Thank you.
Yeah.
So some of these elements, or all of them, were issues that Regiments and McKinsey were discussing with Mr. Anuj Singh at different stages, including July 2015, and later, maybe even after he had been permanently appointed as CFO of Eskom.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Mutepu.
Thank you. So in October,
Yes.
the Minister of Public Development, Public Enterprise, Ms. Lynn Brown, formally appointed, I think on the same day, Mr. Brian Molefe as the CEO and Mr. Anuj Singh as the CFO. So that is when now we were able to work at Eskom. He introduced us to a colleague of his, Miss Maya Bana, Mr. Machala Koko, so I'm on page 575, paragraph 26, under heading work performed by Regiments and TCP at Eskom.
Yes, and as you go there, Ms. Mutepu, just clarify to the chairperson whether at this stage, because you've previously said you are submitting a proposal as Regiments Trillian, to Regiments and McKinsey, it's a proposal submitted to Eskom. You mentioned the services were to be rendered under a master services agreement.
Yes.
And how the allocation of percentages was broken down into 70-30%, 70 in favor of McKinsey, 30% in favor of Regiments. We need to be clarified whether, when you say you're starting to work at Eskom, was that agreement concluded?
You know, I've been a consultant in the public sector. Municipalities, state-owned companies. There's always a difficulty where the public sector service will say, we need work urgently, but the procurement is taking long. So, as I alluded earlier, they had anticipated a confinement, and they were supposed to get, McKinsey was supposed to get 10%, 10.8% on the savings. So, for example, if they could not have any savings, if their initiatives on, for example, procurement or primary energy, which is coal and fuel, diesel, if within, I would say, a year, let's say Eskom spent 5 billion rand and McKinsey's initiatives saved Eskom, let's say now it's 4 billion, so they'll get 10% of the saving, which is 1 billion. So that is why I think Mr. Anuj Singh said, because of your because of that model, it'll be a confinement, and he undertook to get this confinement to be approved by the board and also get National Treasury approval. But he wanted us to work concurrently while he was getting these approvals.
You should
Yes,
also...
so there was no contract in place.
Yes.
And we worked on risk with the anticipation that the board will approve the master service agreement and National Treasury will approve the confinement. Yes.
Yeah, not everybody knows what you mean by confinement. So you may want to explain briefly, well, just one sentence.
It can be,
Basically,
it
for
can
the
be
public,
one.
but I think the public has had quite a lot
Yes.
of it because there have been lots of evidence here about confinement.
So if you say
So-
you are the sole source of that
Yeah.
innovative solution, but
So without following a competitive tender
yes, you don't
process.
have to, but the requirement is that your offering should be innovative. Nobody else should have it. You should be the sole provider. But this was not the case because all the other consulting firms could do exactly the same thing.
So you start working then at Eskom once Mr. Anoj Singh is appointed permanently, but the MSA Master Services Agreement is still not concluded.
Yes, they were negotiating with Mr. Anur Singh. So Eric Wood was negotiating on behalf of Regiments. Mr. Vikas Saga was negotiating on behalf of Mackenzie, and Mr. Anur Singh and Mr. Machala Koko were negotiating on behalf of Eskom.
Well, I wanted to go back to the question I had raised with you earlier on about whether you got the impression that at the meeting of the 8th of July, 2015, Project Pandora, whether you got the impression that McKinsey and Regiments people and Anuj Singh knew one another quite well, but actually it had to be so because he was from Transnet. McKinsey and Regiments had been involved in Transnet, if I recall correctly already.
Oh, that's correct.
And there was evidence of, was it Mr. Bester?
Hank Bester,
Hank
please.
Bester, about a meeting that he had with Mr. Salim Essa and Mr. Anuj Singh.
Correct.
During 2014 in regard to certain Transnet contracts. Yeah, so I'm sure they knew each other quite well.
Yes, you've just jogged my memory, Mr. Chairperson. When we were having coffee, he had told me that they are working...
That's Mr. Wood.
Mr. Wood had told me that they are waiting, they have submitted a proposal to Eskom, they are waiting board approval, but he was 100% certain that the board will approve it. That's why he gave me that generous package,
generous
because
offer.
he wanted me to be
Yes,
there, to lead that team.
Yes.
Yes.
That's quite important.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. Continue, Mr. Slipper.
Yes. So as soon as Mr. Anur Singh was appointed, so we started working at Eskom. We were given consultant access cards, so we were given a form to sign and complete, and so we were given a consultant access cards. I have a picture of mine, but I don't think
I've seen it.
you've seen it, so I don't
Yeah.
think it's that material that we have to go there.
Yeah.
And also, Mr. Singh gave us a designated boardroom for us to work at Eskom. So we worked together with Mackenzie and the Regiments team in this boardroom. Our main contact person was Miss Maya Bana. Yes, so she's the one who organized the boardroom and the logistics, the acquisition of the access cards. So in addition to introducing us to these people, he also introduced us to Mr. Prish Govender, who was the project director, Mr. Machala Koko, who was head of generation, and Mr. Andre Pillay. He was not the treasurer at the time. Ms. Caroline Henry was the treasurer, and Mr. Edwin Mabilane.
Well, let's go back to the time when you were given a designated boardroom at Eskom. Did you work from Eskom on a daily basis? Why did you have to be given a boardroom?
I wasn't working at Eskom on a daily basis, but I was there sometimes. Myself and my team were also working at Transnet on the 1064 management consulting area. I also led the 12 billion rand club loan. I was also working, my team and I were also working on SA Express, and we were also working at Denel. But Mackenzie, I think they were, being a large international organization, I think they had something like between 10 and 20 people who were always there. So we would come in and out depending on what we needed to do. But I had to spread my time and resources on the other clients.
So Apah Club boardroom was designated as the boardroom that Regiments and Mackenzie would use.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
But you say the Regiments team, of which you were part, wasn't there on a daily basis, wasn't at Eskom on a daily basis, because you had to attend to other projects. But you say Mackenzie, by and large, were there on a daily basis?
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes. Did you ever get an understanding why, whether it's Regiments or Mackenzie or both, why they needed to be given an Eskom boardroom for use, it seems, for a long time?
I mean, Anuj would come in and out of the boardroom, we would ask him questions.
Mr. Singh.
Sorry, apologies.
Mr.
Mr.
Singh.
Anuj Singh
Yes.
so he wanted close proximity to the team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he would give us certain things to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd call him and say, no, we need clarity. So he'll just go, I don't know if it was the same floor as his office.
It may have been
Or
for
a
his
different floor. I
convenience.
think it was, the executive wing, I think, is on the top floor. We were in the middle, so he'd just come down and explain. So he wanted the close
Yeah.
proximity.
Okay, no,
Yes.
that's fine. Mr. Slega?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Mutepu, let's see you, because in your affidavit, you were on page 575, paragraph 26.
Yes.
You've mentioned the names of the people at Eskom who you interacted with, and you say each initiative steering team would meet regularly and with designated Eskom representatives at Megawatt Park. And then you deal with what you say are the additional initiatives that were added to the original proposal. In the next paragraph, you could just tell the chairperson about that, because you were saying you would come back to it. Thank you.
If we go to page 575, Mr. Chairperson, paragraph 27. So it was, we had, if you recall, we had the original proposal that was submitted in April of 2015. And Mr. Anuj Singh and Mr. Machala Gogo had a copy of this proposal. And they added 3 more initiatives, or I'll call them initiatives or transactions that were not on the original proposal. And these were online vending and it was the Duva 3 insurance claim and rebuild, and the Hitachi insurance settlement. So these were the, I would say Anuj and Mr. Anuj Singh and Mr. Machala Koko said these are the top initiatives that are keeping us up at night, and we require your assistance with them.
Yes.
So, and the key figures that we dealt with was Mr. Singh and Mr. Koko. If we go to my annexure, which is MM4 and MM5, let me just give you the page reference. It's page 588.1.
Is that
Yes.
the black number?
Are you there? Okay, so it's from Musilo Mutepu, sent the 30th of November 2015. I'm not sure whose email address is at.
Jimmy@escom.co.za.
Yes, and it's copied Machala Koko. And the subject, balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking financial initiative stream. So I say,
I'm sorry. The term Project Pandora, I assume that was just an informal term that was used among yourselves.
that's correct. So now there was no need for the secrecy because now he was now appointed CFO, and now we could officially name.
So what was the official name now? Was it this one here, balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking?
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay.
Yes.
But I guess privately, you didn't cease to refer to Project Pandora.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So.
Yes.
So this is a mail from myself to Mr. Koko. Good day, Machala. I hope this email finds you well. It was a pleasure meeting you last week. I had a chat with Eric Wood regarding additional financial initiatives that need to be included as part of our balance sheet optimization and cash unlocking financial initiatives stream. These include sale and leaseback on the optic fiber network, prepaid electricity vending, that's online vending, EFC disposal, that's Eskom Finance Company disposal, Hitachi claims, replacement of boilers, and Duva insurance claim. We are currently compiling a business case for each initiative and require some information from you and your team. I would like to set up time early next week with yourself and your team to source the additional information in order to complete the business case by the end of the week. Kind regards, Musilo Mutepu, Principal.
Now, was Nkijimi@escom.co.za Mr. Koko's email address?
I'm not sure whose email address that would be, because the fact that I sent it directly to him and I copied Mr. Machala, it doesn't have a name. But if I recall, I met Mr. Koko.
Sorry.
Sorry?
Why would you address the email to him when he was not the addressee, but he was simply being copied?
I think now my memory's jogged. Remember, I said it was a pleasure meeting you last week. So he introduced me to this gentleman. I forgot his name. And I spent about 30 minutes on these proposals. So what I needed Machala to be aware of is that I have spoken to your team, but I need information from you. He was a gentleman of Indian descent. I forgot his name. Yes, but it was Mr. Gogo who introduced me to him. Yes.
So could this email address be that gentleman's email address?
That's correct.
Oh, yeah, okay. Mr. Silega.
Thank you. Ms. Mutepwa, I see that there's another email on page 588.5 of 5 December
Yes,
2015.
So that email was the 30th of November.
Yes.
And then, okay, so between that date, indeed, my team and I were given information. We were introduced to some of the Eskom officials, and so we were able to now to put weight on the business case. Because if you recall, the additional initiatives, we were not, we didn't have information on them. So we spent that week or two interviewing the Eskom officials, getting information, understanding the challenges, proposing some solutions so that we can include them in the final proposal. And this proposal, by the way, had to go to board for approval. So if we go to page 588.5, so now it's from myself, Musilo Motepu, sent the 5th of December 2015 at 9:10 to Mr. Gogo, and I copied Eric Wood. And the subject, Eskom initiatives, and there was the final updated initiatives. So it reads, "Hi Marcella, attached, please find the financial stream initiatives for your review and comment. I'm available on my mobile phone should you wish to contact me, and it's supposed to say, and I can come into the office to discuss, should you wish. Kind regards, Musilo Motepu." And page 588.6 is the attachment. I'll just later on just give you a brief outline of what each transaction entails.
Yes.
So if we go now to...
You
Okay.
don't want to do that now, in terms of what the main features of the attachment.
Because where I cover it, I go on a brief outline and the people responsible from Eskom and from Regiments and Mackenzie. So I would prefer if we could do that.
That's fine.
Thank you. So if we go to page 588.26, so the previous communication was the 5th of December. Now it is the 7th of December. Mr. Gogo and Mr. Mabelane had a chance to go through the updated proposal. And so I was sending it to him. So this is sent on the 7th of December 2015. Subject as to Mr. Machala Gogo. Subject updated proposal, and there's the attachment. Good morning, Marcella. Attached, please find the update proposal for your consideration. Kind regards, Musilo Motepu.
And the attachment is on the next page.
And the attachment on the next page.
Title: Balance Sheet Optimization and Cash Unlocking Initiatives.
The attachment starts at 588.27 up to what page? It's not just one page, eh?
Oh, yes, Chair.
Yes.
Up to what page does it go?
Pardon, can you repeat?
The attachment, it starts at page 588.27. Up to what page does it go?
I think
I
it's...
take it's not a one page.
No, it's very long.
Yeah, I just want to know what constitutes part of the attachment.
Yes. Chair, I think it's 588.49.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And on the next page,
And then on the next page,
there's another email.
we were very busy, but it's on the same day.
When you say on the next page, you mean 588.50?
Yes.
588.50.
250,
Okay.
Chairperson. Thank you.
So the previous email I sent at 8:09. I had time to go to meet with Mr. Machala Koko. He had made updates and reviews, and so I sent him the updated proposal at the same day, the 7th of December, this time at 12:33. So it reads, Dear Machala, attached, please find the updated financial proposal document for this afternoon's meeting at 2:00. Kind regards, Musilo Motepu.
We don't see emails from them to you.
I'm going to, there's some,
Replying to your email.
yes, we,
For the sake of
they never,
Sorry. For the sake of completeness, mention again up to what page that attachment goes, starting at page 588.51.
is it 100 or is that a different one? Let me see.
Does it go up to 588.209?
I think it goes up to 588.74.
Yes.
Chairperson.
Yeah, it's important because otherwise sometimes can be difficult to see in the bundle
Yes.
whether a particular document is still part of an attachment or it's a standalone document.
So it's
Okay.
from
Yeah.
588.51 to 588.74. Ms. Mutip will take us to the next email.
So I'm taking you to the next email, Mr. Chairperson, 588.75.
Thank you.
If you recall the previous email, I mentioned a meeting at 2:00. So that meeting had happened. So I sent an email at the same day, now at 8:21 in the evening. We had met Mr. Mabelane and Mr. Machala Koko. So it's to Mr. Mabelane and Machala Koko. I've copied Mr. Eric Wood, Mr. Vikas Saga. My team was Asanda Smith, Fahima Badat, Grant Joseph, and Mr. Mohammed Bobat. And the subject is Eskom cash unlocking initiatives. So it reads, Dear Machala and Edwin, attached, please find the revised cash unlocking initiatives for your review and comments. As per your request, we sat with your technical team who provided us guidance and additional information to the document. We have incorporated their inputs and comments to the body of the document. Kind regards, Musilo Motepu. And so that attachment is 55.76, and then it goes on to, it ends on
588.100.
100.
Chairperson. Now the email, Ms. Matepu, on page 588.50. 588.50, 7 December 2015 at 12:33 to Mr. Koko. It alluded to a meeting in the afternoon at 1400. Did that meeting take place?
Yes, that meeting takes place. If you go to page 588.75,
Yes.
it says, remember I said, hi, Machala and Edwin, as per your request, as in,
Yes.
during that meeting at 2:00, we sat with your technical team and they provided guidance and information. If you see that after that 2 o'clock meeting, we met with the team, hence we worked through the night and up until almost 8:30 in the evening to incorporate the proposal.
So this is still at the drafting stage of the proposal. You haven't rendered services yet.
Not yet.
Did you get to render services?
Yes.
You did,
In January 2016, I'll get there.
in January 2016.
Yes. Plus, after this, my team started working on the online vending and the DUVA 3 and the funding plan. So I'll go into that detail.
Yes.
What is important, Mr. Chairperson, if we go to any of the attachments, let's go, I'll take you to page 588.51.
This is one of the proposals.
Yes, so
Or a version of.
if you look at so our contract was it was supposed to be on a success base. So if you go to page 588.53, it's the arrangement of, okay, let me wait for you to get there.
I am there.
You're there? So it's the arrangement of long-term facilities. So that's long-term loans. So if we could arrange Eskom, let's say 2 billion, if you go to the next page, so it's page 588.45, 1.3 project cost. So what regiments,
I think you said 4.5, you meant 5.4.
sorry, 5.4.
Yeah.
And you go to
588.
1.3, the project cost. So that is how much is it going to cost Eskom. So let's say we raised 2 billion in long-term facilities. Once Eskom gets that money, they would have to pay, if you go, Eskom will be charged a capital raising fee of 1.5%, 150 basis points for the successful origination, negotiating, and raising of funding. So all of these initiatives were based on risk. And once they are completed, all of them have a different fee. So if we didn't raise, even if we worked there for a year and we didn't raise a cent, you would not incur, Eskom will not pay us. So that was in all of these initiatives. I won't take you through each one, but that was the premise of the contract.
The intended contract.
Yes, the intended contract.
That never.
That never happened. Okay.
But, Ms. Mtepe, I know you're going to take the chairperson through other things there that you feel strongly to draw to his attention. I want us not to lose the bigger picture. So that, let me do that exercise. So you are at the proposal stage. You say you started rendering the services in 2016. That will be the services contemplated in these proposals.
That's correct. And if I can correct myself, we started rendering services in 2015, probably November, December.
So that is even prior to the finalization of these proposals.
That's correct.
Okay. And there's no contract.
There's no contract. The MSA is still being negotiated. So there was no contract.
Yes.
It was in anticipation of the finalization of the contract and board approval and National Treasury approval.
So what services do you start rendering as regiments? Can you recall?
I can recall it was the online vending, and it was the DUVA 3 insurance claim. We went to their insurer, which was Marsh, and we negotiated the boiler in, I think it's in Mpumalanga, had exploded. And they were negotiating an insurance claim with Marsh. I think they were the independent insurance assessors.
So your services were to do what in respect of that?
I have to say something, it's in my observation, which I make at the end, but I think it's important now with high insight. Eskom was capable of all of these initiatives on their own. The fact that others were added. So when we started working with Eskom's team, the officials were the lower ranking technocrats who were actually working on these transactions already, had the capacity, the expertise to do it. I remember even on the Duva 3 insurance, I know nothing about insurance. And I told Eric, I don't have any inkling about a boiler and insurance, but we were shoved down the throats of the Eskom officials. And of course, there was a lot of resistance. So, I mean, in my observation, I say that part of state capture essentially is just appointing consultants unnecessarily and siphoning off very large fees, while the internal team has the capacity and expertise to perform them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so
Of course,
In
that's
that case,
important.
of course, where some individuals within an entity give work to outsiders to do for the entity, that can be done by people employed within the entity.
100%, Mr. Chairperson.
That's a case of you just want to give those people money.
Precisely.
Yeah, because there is no need.
There's absolutely no need,
Yeah.
because Eskom had an insurance division, it was headed by somebody who is an expert in insurance. My team and I knew nothing about insurance. The Treasury team can negotiate long-term and short-term loan facilities. They had relationships with the banks. They had relationships with the asset managers and the pension funds. All they had to do was, if they issue bonds, is obviously they would have to appoint a lead manager on which are the local and international banks registered in South Africa, and they would pay them a marginal fee. But all of these initiatives, Eskom already had teams working on them. We came in as McKinsey, as Regiments, and eventually Trillian, in the middle of the implementation of these transactions. And I mean, a total of 1.6 billion rand was paid, which was completely unnecessary because Eskom had and still does have the capacity to do them.
But that begs the question, Ms. Mtepu. Did you know these things at the time? And what was your attitude in regard to it?
My attitude was, I think, I told Eric, we do not have any expertise in this, so I'm not comfortable to continue. And also getting a lot, Mr. Eric Wood.
In respect of insurance.
Yes,
only,
insurance.
Or in regard to other things as well.
Yes, and the insurance and...
Yeah,
Yes.
just understand the question, because we want to know, well, my question really related to everything, whether in respect of all these initiatives, are you saying Eskom had people who were already working on them and they could do that, or are you confining that comment only in respect of the insurance part?
All of them.
All of them, yes, and that's
All of
my
them.
question. And my question is, if you're saying now that, well, you could observe, but Eskom as people, they were already implementing these things, and it parted with over 1.6 billion rand, all for nothing. My question was, but didn't you, what was your attitude at the time? Were you not aware of these things at the time?
No, my attitude at the time was to essentially, my reservation we're not needed. And we don't have the expertise. And
Well, that's the part I was asking.
yes,
whether,
and then, so,
hang on,
yes.
Whether, when you said you didn't have, your team didn't have the expertise, you meant in regard to insurance that you have talked about, or are you talking about everything that you were asked to do for Eskom?
The only
Or
expertise,
some elements?
the only expertise we had were two, which was the negotiation of the short-term loan facilities and the negotiation of the long-term loan facilities. We were experts at that. But the insurance, cyber optic, I don't know. There was a Hitachi settlement. There was an insurance of Duva 3 and the rebuild as well. So we were completely, our heads were under the water. And I expressed my reservation that, and that is why,
To whom did you express your reservations?
to Mr. Wood, that is why Mr. Edward Mabelan and Mr. Machala Koko brought in the teams that were already working on these transactions. So to explain to the consultant, this is what we're doing. And we were asking very elementary questions because we were completely clueless about insurance and boilers, and it was quite embarrassing, I have to say.
But now, it's quite interesting. One would have thought that if you were supposed to have this expertise, maybe you were supposed to have better expertise than the internal team. One would have thought that you would secretly go and get experts to tell you exactly what's happening, where you could ask all the questions and then come back, feeling more knowledgeable. But it's interesting that Eskom actually brought its own people to explain to you.
To the consultant who are getting paid.
Now, do you remember the people that Mr. Machala Koko brought to explain these things to you? Because that's important, from Eskom.
If you recall, I said it was that a gentleman of Indian descent.
Yeah.
So he brought his team,
Well,
but
was
I had forgotten his name.
Was it a Mr. Govender by any chance?
No, it wasn't Prish. It was not Prish,
okay.
Mr. Prish Governor. It
Okay.
was not.
Okay.
Yes.
And who else? Or you can't remember others?
I don't recall because he just brought his colleagues.
Yeah. So they explained these things to you,
Yes.
and were they made to be like your team and them to be like one team working together, or they were brought in to explain whatever needed to be explained and then go back and leave you to continue?
The earlier we were supposed
First
to
one.
work together with,
Yeah.
with the internal team.
So that you would be seen to have done the job, but actually they are the ones who would have actually either done the job or guided you to do the job.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson. All of these initiatives had commenced.
Yeah.
Obviously, they were all at various stages of completion. Some had board approval, others were still had to be submitted to board. So we just came in somewhere in between.
So now when your team and the team that Mr. Machala Koko brought to you to explain certain things worked together, the products, was it then presented as your team's product?
No, the product was presented as Eskom's product.
Oh, but now, weren't you going to charge for it?
Remember, we would only be charged Eskom upon the successful.
Okay.
So we were not like auditors or lawyers where
okay,
we charge
okay.
per hour.
Oh, but still, you are going to charge for a product that basically Eskom did for themselves.
That's quite correct. I mean, we can even go back to the Transnet China Development Bank loan where Regiments was paid 189 million,
Yes,
and Transnet Treasury
Yeah.
had the capacity and expertise
yes.
to negotiate and originate. Even the former Transnet treasurer said, it's too expensive, we don't agree. And then Regiment was brought in, she left. The former treasurer, Mr. Petulorabo Sibudi, came and he appointed Regiments, and his team had the capacity to negotiate that, but 190 million rand went towards the consultant. So it's a cut and paste everywhere.
Yeah. But when you realize this whole thing, you couldn't feel good about it, could you?
At the time, I think because I came in the beginning,
Yeah.
I mean in the middle, plus I was a principal, even in as much as I think my stance takes a different view when I'm now CEO in March 2016. So I would have a reservation and communicate it to Mr. Wood. He would say, no, don't worry about it.
It would end there.
Just work.
Yeah, okay, okay. All right.
So until when did you remain there, Ms. Motepu?
If there's some events at Eskom
No,
or at
no.
Regiments.
As an employee of Regiments, which later becomes Trillian, you see all these things happening, these transactions or services rather that are being rendered by Regiments, well, we haven't come to Trillian yet, that could competently be rendered by the inside employees who do not even share in the percentage when you do get the money. So how long did you stay there? When did you leave?
I left last day at Trillian was the 31st of May 2016. I'd been at the job as the Trillian CEO for 3 months, and I officially resigned 22nd of June.
Yeah, so you're nearly a year with this team, whether it's under the name of Regiments or under the name of Trillian. You were there for about a year.
That's correct.
And what made you leave? We will come back to the details of what happens, but what made you leave?
I think,
Or were you...
first of all,
Were you
a
fired?
lot of, no, I was not fired. I wrote a letter to Eric sometime in my lawyer on the 31st of May, essentially saying, these are my views. There was a unilateral change in my employment. And then also, I'd raised flags, red flags with regards to the fact that we were working at Eskom without a contract. And the other clients, the other state-owned companies, Regiments was supposed to cede those contracts to Trillian, and that did not happen. And that did not happen. And I was kept in the dark. Mr. Teboho Lebalo told me about it. Then I realized that as a director, I was liable. So I wrote a letter through my lawyers to Eric on the 31st of May, 2016, and then he asked me not to return to the office. And we tried a mediation. He refused. He refuted every allegation, and he said, "I'm complaining because I'm not performing. I'm overwhelmed by the job," and I resigned, and I took him to Trillian to the CCMA for constructive dismissal. So I did try and change the way we worked, but my concerns fell on deaf ears up until it was I needed to leave.
Yeah, I think it's better to go back to the story.
Yes,
because
no.
that's at the tail end.
Yes, no, indeed.
Yes, you asked.
I
Yeah.
did
I
mention-
know he asked you, but it breaks the sequence.
chain.
Yes, it does.
It breaks the sequence. Yeah.
No, that's
Whereas we
correct.
will reach it.
Yes, we will.
Yes. So these services then were being rendered by you say from November 2015 onwards, You are still drafting the proposal. The agreement has not been signed, the master service agreement. We are in 2016. Maybe you could take us through 2016 because there's an important event in March. You need to deal with that as well.
Thank you very much.
Which is, sorry, together with that is how Trillian became Trillian.
Okay.
Because we've been referring to Regiments.
Yes, I think let me
But
start
remember,
there.
she did cover that last time. How Trillian came about,
Yes.
and how she moved from Regiments to Trillian.
But-
She did cover that.
Yes, but I think there's an important development that is specific to Eskom. So if you recall, in my earlier testimony, I said that Mackenzie and Regiments were supposed to move from Transnet to Eskom via confinement. Regiments was already Mackenzie's supply development partner. So in December 2015, Eric Wood, alongside Lita Nyonya and Niven Pillay, the other shareholders and directors of Regiment, said we are parting ways. Eric and a black businessman or BEE partner, he never said Mr. Salim Issa, well, they are going to purchase Regiment's advisory, which is financial advisory and management consulting. So in December, we were already aware that on the 1st of March 2016, there's going to be the split. Now, there was a complication. Eric now told Mr. Eric Wood told Mr. Anuj Singh that Mackenzie is replacing Regiments with Trillian as the supply development partner. So what needed to happen was something Mackenzie calls a credit risk review, a due diligence on the new supply development partner. So from January 2016, Mackenzie had a whole list of questions about the new supply development partner. And I will eventually go into the outcome of the credit review committee. So in 2016, January, there was a steering committee that was established between Eskom executives, and namely Mr. Singh. I'm now on page 576, paragraph 29. And I think I've mentioned these individuals before, and how I was introduced to the various executives. I'm going to.
Is it not paragraph 44 you're looking for on page 579?
Yes, but I think it's a repetition. Oh, so we had the first steering committee. It was chaired by Mr. Anuj Singh. It took place, so in this chairing committee, we would, Regiments and Mackenzie would essentially flesh out their initiatives. And each initiative was allocated an official from Eskom who would champion it, an official from Mackenzie, and an official from Regiments. So in my employee at Regiments and Trillian, there was two steering committee meetings. One was on the 9th of February 2016, and the last one was on the 31st of March 2016. They were always at Megawatt Park. Okay, so I'm going to now go through, I think I'll skip paragraph 31 to 34. I'll come to that later on. But now I would like to focus on the the transactions we worked on. So this is now page 577, paragraph 35. So it's 1.6 billion guarantee in favor of Tegeta Exploration and Resources Limited from Absa Bank. Now, Eric and I used to work very closely together.
Hang on one second. The Denton's report you skipped because it's more convenient to deal with it later.
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Selega, is that okay?
That's correct. That's fine, Chair.
All right.
That's fine.
Okay. Yes, continue.
Yes. So,
So you are now talking under the 1.68 billion guarantee.
that's correct.
Okay.
So Eric and I worked together, and I think we were working on the club loan at Transnet. So the banks, especially Absa Bank, knew that Eric and I worked closely together. So,
Looks like I will never succeed to get you
oh
to
my goodness, I'm so sorry, Mr. Wood.
refer to them appropriately in a forum such as this.
Apologies.
Okay. All right.
Yes, so we had worked together closely on the club loan with Absa Bank. Absa Bank was one of the banks that lent Transnet, I think it was 3 billion rand on the club loan. So, and we liaised with Ms. Tulizulu, who was a transactor at Absa in the corporate banking side, focusing on state-owned companies. So early December, I cannot remember the exact date, I got a call from Ms. Tulizulu, and she asked, she was very confused because she said that Mr. Anuj Singh had called her to explain the process of securing a guarantee on behalf of Tegeta of 1.6 billion. And because Eric, she thinks that I should know what is happening. I told her, no, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, because Absa had questions with regards to the nature of the guarantee, because it's very strange for a state-owned company to provide a guarantee to a private company. So Absa, the product specialists were very confused. So I went into Eric's office, and I went into Mr. Wood's office, and I relayed the conversation I had with Ms. Tulizulu, and he said no, I can sit in on a conference call. So I called Ms. Tulizulu to schedule a conference call, and I think it happened within 10 minutes. So I just sat in that conference call, and so Eric had to essentially unpack how this guarantee was going to work, and they wanted Absa essentially to provide that guarantee, and it was going to be on 3 months, and they had various questions, of course, because it's very strange, as I alluded earlier, how does a state-owned company provide a guarantee to a private company? And eventually Eric was able to explain, and they were satisfied with his explanation. Now, it's quite interesting. One of the questions that Ms. Tuluzulu asked was, who are the shareholders of Tegeta? And Eric said, no, he'll revert back to Ms. Zulu. And so I asked Eric, out of curiosity, after the conference call, who are the shareholders of Tegeta? And he said, no, it's Mr. Duduzane Zuma. And he said I should not tell Ms. Tulizulu about that development. So Absa got all the approvals, I think the following week, and Mr. Anuj Singh and the then treasurer, Ms. Caroline Henry signed the guarantee. And I think it lapsed in April 2016. Okay, so if I go to 37, so we were in January 2016, as annually, each state-owned company has to submit a corporate plan. And as alluded earlier, part of the corporate plan is a funding plan. This is essentially something that happens every year. The Treasury submits this funding plan to the shareholder and to National Treasury. So we were requested by Mr. Anuj Singh to assist Mr. Andre Pillay in the funding plan. Something very strange happened because I got this instruction on Friday, late afternoon, and Mr. Singh wanted this funding plan by Monday. So it was quite, I didn't understand how come I have to do a funding plan over the weekend. So I called Mr. Andre Pillay, and he had no idea about Mr. Singh's instruction for us as the consultants to draft this funding plan, because it's annually it's performed by Treasury. So he had no idea that we were supposed to do the funding plan, because I was trying to get an extension. Eskom has, as I said, they finance between 70 and 80 billion rand a year. And a funding plan, I think, goes up to 5 years. So over the weekend, we had to do a plan, which was completely unreasonable. And what I later found that Mackenzie knew all along, but they didn't tell us. So when Anuj says, guys, remember, I'm expecting a funding plan on Monday, then Eric frantically called me and said, you have to work over the weekend and do this funding plan. So my team and I worked over the weekend. The team from Regiments side consisted of Eric Wood, Fahima Badat, Stephen Altringham, Tyron Brandes, and Grant Joseph. Now we met the deadline. I tried getting hold of Mr. Singh, but unfortunately he wasn't picking up. So obviously, if you go to page 578, these were the points that we had to look at. So it's 37.1, ensuring that there would be sufficient cash available to meet all of Eskom's operational and capital requirements, credit rating considerations, funding sources, markets, investor appetite and concerns, and financial risk management. So we submitted, but obviously the quality of the funding plan was less to be desirable. So Anuj was not happy with the funding plan. So
apart from Mr. Andre Pillay, or even including him, were you assisted by employees within Eskom to come up with that draft?
Over the weekend, we worked alone, and we submitted without the Treasury's input, because if you recall, Mr. Andre Pillay had no idea about the instruction to draft a funding plan by Monday. But when Mr. Singh saw how it was terrible, it was a terrible job, so he roped in Mr. Andre Pillay and his team, and my team and the Treasury team worked together.
Oh, I see.
To eventually have... Again. Yes.
I see we have done just over 2 hours.
Yes,
Maybe we should have a short
indeed.
break. How long do you think you might still need with Ms. Matepu before she finishes?
Chair, I'm capable of shortening Ms. Matepu to 30 minutes, but I know she wants to tell you much more than...
Well, the important thing is that we strike an appropriate balance between not spending more time than we should
Yes.
on one witness, but also ensuring that we do justice to the issues. So that's the guiding principle.
Yes.
Let's take a short adjournment of 10 minutes and then we come back.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn. Okay, I guess, Mr. Seleka, you must resume your role of leading. Ms. Matepu,
Yes, Chair.
don't allow her to lead herself.
She's already told me she wants to take 1 more hour.
Yeah?
She said she wants to take 1 more hour.
Was that a threat or a promise?
I have load shedding at my house, so I can be here all night.
Okay, Mr. Selega, please lead her.
Let me lead the witness, and Ms. Bianca Goodson is already here, Chairperson.
Yes.
So let's-
Yeah,
let's streamline
without
this.
compromising on doing justice to the important issues,
Yes, Chair.
let's not spend 1 more minute
Yes,
that we don't need to spend on
yes.
her evidence. But in the end, we must cover important issues.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Chair, earlier, Ms. Motepu said the issue of online vending came up yesterday, but that was 2 days ago. And let me refer the chairperson to what Ms. Motepu is talking about in Eskom Bundle 18B. And Chair, you have to look at that by reference to Bundle 14, page 573, which is the affidavit of Ms. Motepu.
Okay, just repeat what you just said, Mr.
Yes.
Seleka.
So the bundle now given to the chairperson is 18B, page
Yes.
1032.
Yes.
Chairperson will see it's an email from Mr. Machela Koko. It's dated Monday, 20 July 2015. It's addressed to sent to info portal 1 at zoho.com. And the subject is top engineers.
Top engineers, yes.
Top engineers, that's the first. And the second email is page 1056. It's also from Mr. Machela Koko, Saturday, 8 August 2015, also to info portal,
What page?
1056.
Yeah.
An email from Mr. Machela Koko, dated 8 August 2015 on Saturday, and sent to info portal. Subject is online vending. And the message says, we don't know, there's no dear sir or whoever, the name. The message simply says, we did not finish our discussions about this transaction. This is what is going to board on 18 August. Now what Ms. Motepu, referring to online vending, that came up during the testimony. She was referring to this chairperson.
So,
Then you go back to her affidavit.
so I guess on Mr. Koko's version of who he says he thought he was addressing these emails to,
Yes.
we are supposed to take it that when he says this is what is going to board of 18 August, he was telling the chairperson of the board
Correct, Chair.
what was coming to the board on the 18th
On
of
the 18th
August.
of August, 2015.
Yes, okay. All right, you were referring me somewhere else as well?
Yes, then we go back to Ms. Motepu's affidavit,
Yes.
page 573.
What was the point about page 1032? That is the email address from
Yes.
Mr. Machela Koko to
Yeah,
info portal, job engineers.
yes. Is that apparent from these emails, Chairperson? There's documents, top engineers on the one hand, a PDF document, and on the other, online vending document, PDF document, which are exchanged with info portal, which are the part of the proposals made by Regiments, which you see in Ms. Motepu's affidavit.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just repeat that.
Yes. So the documents exchanged in the two emails.
Yeah, that is one at 1032,
Yes.
and the other one is at what again? What page?
1056.
Yes, yeah.
1056.
The attachments.
Those attachments.
Yeah.
They form part of the proposal that Ms. Motepu has been talking about,
Yes.
that Regiment is preparing for Eskom.
Okay. Yes.
And
Yes.
so you see that on page 573,
Yes.
if we go back to bundle 14.
Yes. Okay. Then now we go back to her affidavit.
Correct, Chair.
At what page in her affidavit?
573.
573. Yes.
You start paragraph 16:16. So she says the McKinsey and Regiments had submitted a joint proposal in the first quarter of 2015, where McKinsey and Regiments were supposed to assist Eskom with management consulting services under the Master Service Agreement, which included cost savings on procurement, generation primary energy, and the establishment of Eskom's top engineering program. So the top engineers or top engineering program is one, which you see in the first email, the 1032 email. The vending online is in the next paragraph, paragraph 18, Chairperson, and 18.3 in particular, which is part of the initiatives in regard to the balance optimization and cash unlocking. So that vending, online vending, is what Ms. Motepu on page 575, paragraph 27, says was one of the additional transaction or initiatives added to the original proposal. It was added subsequently by Mr. Machela Koko and Mr. Anod Singh. Added initiatives that were originally not in the proposal. And the first one is that online vending. So the emails show that this documents or initiatives in regard to some of these documents, or documents in regard to some of these initiatives, would have been exchanged with Info Portal. One in July 2015 and the other one in August 2015. So, Ms. Motepu, you as Regiments were then also asked to do proposals on this very subject matters.
That's correct. And if you recall, my last testimony, I said that Mr. Salim Issa and Mr. Kuben Mudli were Regiments business development partners. So they are the ones who essentially sourced these contracts with from the state-owned companies under the umbrella of the Department of Public Enterprise. And I'm sure you've seen testimony that the bulk of the fees that Regiments earned from Transnet, from SA Express, from SAA, probably I would say between 50 and 60% of it was paid in commissions to Mr. Kuben Mudli and Mr. Salim Issa.
I wanted to say on a light note that Ms. Mutepo seems more reserved after the break than before. Maybe it's because I said she was leading herself. Yes, continue, Mr. Selega.
I had to flex my muscles, Chair. Ms. Mutepo, you were taking us through what you say are the services rendered by regiments to Eskom, and the first one was the funding
Can I ask
plan.
this question? Please don't forget your question,
Yes.
Mr. Selega. Can I ask this question because I don't want to forget it. You interacted with, among other people at Eskom, Mr. Koko and Mr. Anuj Singh in 2015 and 2016. In your interactions with them, are you aware of them using this email address info portal? And if you are aware, is there anything you can tell me which might throw light on what their understanding would have been as to who they were communicating with?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairperson, I cannot throw light because the first time I saw this info portal email was at the commission. So in my time at Regiments, in my time at Trillian,
Yes.
I never used it, and even in my
Yes.
correspondence,
You never
nobody
knew
ever
about it.
copied that email.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Continue, Mr. Selega.
Thank you, Chair. Was Mr. Salim Issa part of regiments?
No, he was not part of Regiments, he was the business development partner. So he was the guy who sourced the contracts with the state-owned companies, and he would earn a commission. So he was not formally part of Regiments, nor was Mr. Kuben Mudli. So he didn't have an...
So a business development partner sourcing work for regiments.
That's correct.
And this work we are now talking about, do you know whether or not it would have been sourced by him?
I suspect so.
So you don't know for sure.
I don't know for sure.
Well, you got in the middle of it.
That's correct. But if you look at the Transnet model, I earlier mentioned that Regiments was paid 190 million rand for negotiating the China Development $2.5 billion loan. About 60% of that money went to Mr. Issa. So if you duplicate that model, it was going to, plus now at Trillian, he was no longer a supply development partner. He was now a 60% shareholder. So when Trillian was paid, they'll just declare dividends, and the money will flow to him as a majority shareholder.
Yes. Ms. Mtepu, you, in addition to the funding plan you've already mentioned as one of the services you rendered, even though you were put under pressure and your draft was trashed, you mentioned 6 more initiatives that you worked on page 578 to 579. You could, in a nutshell, just tell the chairperson what are those projects or initiatives, whatever you call them, and who at Eskom you worked with, if at all you worked with, in terms of giving you instructions and working together in the rendition of the services.
Thank you. Before I proceed, may I please have another bottle of water? Okay, let's go to page,
I think probably give her two,
yes, please.
because I've observed that she drinks water quite frequently. Yes.
Yes, my mouth gets dry when I'm nervous.
Okay, all
Okay,
right.
so we're on page 578. We're on paragraph 38, analysis of China Development Bank's 500 million loan facility. So Anuj sent us a proposal. Mr. Singh sent Regiments through Eric Wood, Mr. Eric Wood, a proposal of $500 million US that the China Development Bank had made to Eskom. So, and obviously it was, there was an interest rate attached to it. So he asked my team to review if it was competitive. As I said, the Treasury at Eskom could easily do this work.
Well, I was about to ask the question because I see that at paragraph 38 you say your team assisted Anuj Singh and Andre Pillay, and I wondered whether you assisted them or Andre Pillay assisted you.
At least at this particular point, remember I said there were two areas that we were experts at. So this is
Yes.
funding. But I can say that his treasury team at Eskom could have easily
done the job
done the analysis
just as
because
well.
they knew what Eskom's average cost of funding was,
Yeah.
and then compare it to what the Chinese Development Bank had
Yes.
proposed.
Yes.
So this was not
Yes.
anything complex or
Yeah.
difficult.
And of course, when something like this is done, namely bringing in outside service providers to do something that can be done by people who are employed full-time, who are paid to do that kind of job. One is just an unnecessary duplication, but actually the entity effectively pays for work that pays outsiders for work that it has already paid the people who are employed on a full-time basis to do the job.
Precisely, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes, continue.
So
There-
from,
Sure, there's one observation from what she said about business development partner, that info portal was called Businessman. So there seems to be this, now the connection, why businessman is businessman? Because he was developing a business development partner.
Yes, but isn't the position that businessman was the name and info portal was the email address
Correct,
that was used by businessmen?
correct.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just that sometimes there would be no reference to businessmen in
Yes.
emails sometimes, but the email address would be there.
Yes,
But businessmen didn't use any other email address, is that correct?
not as far as we have.
As we know so far.
Yes,
So, yeah, okay, okay.
so it's not far from him, his designation as a business development partner. It may well explain why he's called businessman.
in addition, if I can just assist the chairperson, I was contacted by Faduzzi investigators while they were doing their investigation on Eskom and Transnet. And they also asked me this question with regards to, do I know who the owner of the account was? And they showed me an email, I think it was from Minister Lynn Brown's PA, and she started saying, "Dear Salim." So I saw that, but obviously I gave them the same response
Yes.
that I gave you, that I never,
Yes.
I never used the email.
Yes, yes, I think we've seen that.
We have, Chair.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
referred to it here.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, Chair, if I lead the witness, Ms.
Yes,
Mtepe,
please.
so you,
But that email address from Minister Brown's PA addressed to Salim and using the info portal email address, wasn't that quite recent when there was evidence about it here? Or was I just reading that email outside of the hearing?
yeah, I know we have relied on it insofar as it is in the Fundutsi report.
Yeah,
And it is to that extent that we have put that to the witnesses.
yeah.
The email itself, Chairperson, I don't think is of, when you say recent, Chair, would you have 2020 in mind?
No,
not-
actually, it could be the 2021 or 2020, December, November. But it may be that it's not something that came up at the hearing. Maybe I came across it outside of the hearing. Won't somebody just try and trace that email, please, again?
Yes.
To see where it is. So once again, it's an email from Ms. Davis, Kim Davis, who was the executive PA to Minister Brown,
Yes.
and it goes to the info portal address, and it says, "Dear Salim."
Yes, Chair.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's fresh in my mind.
I know that the Fundutsi report is of July 2019. There are two reports, but we will check. with
Yeah.
the Chairperson.
Okay. All right. Yes. Let's continue.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that you saw that as well.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Chairperson. So, as I said, we assisted Mr. Anuj Singh with a comparison, and we gave him advice. 39, an analysis of Goldman Sachs 30 billion loan facility. So Goldman Sachs, I'm not sure if Regiments had introduced Goldman Sachs to Mr. Singh and Eskom, or if Goldman Sachs had already had a relationship with Eskom and Mr. Singh, and Regiments was brought in. So that I'm not clear about. But once Mr. Singh was appointed the CFO, we had to work alongside Goldman Sachs. They had proposed a 30 billion rand loan facility, and we essentially had to analyze their proposal, the quantum, the interest rate, is it comparable again? And from Regiment's side, it was Mr. Eric Wood, it was Mrs. Fahima Badat, and on Eskom's side was Mr. Singh and Mr. Andre Pillay.
So who is providing a loan? Goldman Sachs to Eskom?
Pardon?
Who's providing a loan?
It's Goldman Sachs
To
to
Eskom.
Eskom. So it was a 30 billion rand loan facility.
Yes. Then the next is online vending,
The next is online vending.
and I'm going to lead on that, which is, you say on the part of Eskom, Mr. Anod Singh was there, Mr. Pranish Gavenda, Mr. Edwin Mabelani, and Mr. Machela Koko. Your team assisted Eskom on this online vending. What does that entail? Online vending, can you recall?
About 20% of Eskom's customers are on prepaid electricity. So Eskom had a lot of suppliers like Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Checkers, some of the petrol stations. So it had a lot of supply agreements with these vendors. It wanted to reduce the administration of dealing with so many vendors and have a master vendor. And this master vendor would essentially be contracted to Eskom, and then this master vendor would now subcontract the other vendors. And this was part of the cash unlocking initiatives, because they said that that master vendor had to have the capacity, I think either via a bank guarantee, to buy the entire year worth of prepaid at once, and then it distributes it to the other vendors. So that is what online vending was.
Did you achieve all this? Did you successfully assist Eskom achieve what you were tasked to do here?
I think they eventually, I think Blue Label was eventually awarded the contract as a master vendor, but it was, I think, a year or two after I had left Trillian.
Chair, Blue Label, you would recall that name.
What's the name?
It's related to
Mr. Mark Pominski, who was a board member at
Mr.
Eskom.
Paminsky.
Mark Pominski.
Yeah, I
Yes.
remember.
was employed at Blue Label.
He recused himself in board meetings when it came to certain matters, because he had some relationship with either Trillian or Regiments or Salim Essa or the Guptas.
It was to get at the time the prepayment decision.
Yeah.
Mr. Mark Pominski was supposed to be the CEO of Trillian Property.
Do not.
And he had a-
Do not mention.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry,
Pominski.
apologies, I didn't mention him. Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to tell the chairperson
Yes.
how Blue Label has
Yes.
been mentioned here. Then you have three more projects you worked on page 579. Eskom Finance Company, in respect of which you say from Eskom side, the team was Mr. Machela Koko, Mr. Prish Govender, Mr. Nod Singh. You rendered services there. You mentioned also from your side who was present. Next paragraph is Duva 3 Power Station Insurance. Again from Eskom side, Eskom Executive, the last sentence in that paragraph, responsible for this transaction comprised of were Mr. Anod Singh, Jackie Kalani, and Mr. Machela Koko. Is Jackie the Miss or Mr.?
It's Miss, and she was head of Eskom Insurance.
Yeah. Then the last one, which is the seventh in the list, is insurance claims management in relation to Hitachi settlement offer. Eric Wood and Fahim Badat advised Eskom on the Hitachi settlement offer. So you did not take part in that one?
Not at all, no.
No. Now, some of this, you haven't located some of these projects and services rendered by Regiments in respect of the time or date when they were rendered. Can you indicate to the chairperson, when does this get to be done? Is it from November, as you said, 2015? To which date?
The majority of them started October, well, I'll say November 2015, and they continued on to as regiments. And then on the 1st of March, then they continued on to Trillian. But what was finalized, I think, was the Duva 3 claim. That did not continue after the 1st of March. We had completed the Goldman Sachs 30 billion at Regiments and the $500 million China development facility. The others continued on to Trillian after the 1st of March 2016.
Yes. Okay, I understand later in your affidavit you deal with the denials by Eskom officials that they had either you could tell the chairperson about those denials.
Do you want us to go into detail now or later on?
Not into details, but because
Okay.
we have covered this
All
part,
right.
I think it's relevant just to say to the chairperson, this is how Eskom officials and which ones have denied that you rendered services.
Mr. Chairperson, if you recall my testimony last December, I said my statement was leaked to the Sunday Times. And what I told then Public Protector Trillian was that Eskom paid Trillian without a contract. And I listed these transactions that we assisted them on. After that Sunday Times revelation, a lot of the media started calling Eskom spokesperson, asking them to comment on the revelations that I had made. So the Eskom stance was, Eskom did not have a contract with Trillian or Regiments, and we did not, and neither Regiments nor Trillian assisted them on the Duva 3 claim, the Hitachi, the China Development Bank loan, and I think Goldman Sachs. So we were denied, like I guess Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So we were completely denied, yes. And what subsequently happened was...
Then what was the explanation of why payment had been made?
Unfortunately, when the Sunday Times leaked my story, they didn't have my supporting documentation. So that's why Eskom was able to just do a blanket denial. It was only after Mr. Sekhwale, who was the chairperson of Trillian, appointed senior counsel Jeff Badlander, that I had sight of these emails, and he eventually did vindicate my allegations, thank God, that there was no truth to what Mr. Singh had said to his spokesperson, that that indeed there was no contract, which is factually correct. Plus, we did assist them in those transactions. And he said they have not paid Trillian a cent, which is true. They had paid Trillian 595 million rand, and which he denied. What subsequently happened was that a member of the DA, Ms. Natasha Mazzoni, laid a complaint to the Public Protector that Ms. Brown had misled Parliament because after this confusion, the DA MP needed clarity because she had asked Ms. Lynn Brown, can you please give us a comment or an explanation with regards to the contract between Trillian and Eskom and how much money has been paid? So Ms. Brown went to Eskom, obviously Mr. Anurj Singh, and his response was there was no contract and there was no payment. So eventually the Public Protector found that Ms. Lynn Brown had inadvertently misled Parliament.
Yes, no.
Okay.
I recall Mr. Anurj Singh being asked about that at the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. So those are the projects, you rendered services. Some of them seem to have been shady services. Others you think you were experts on. Payments were, I don't know whether payments, you could tell the chairperson, because what we see from the evidence is that payments, most of the payments were made from August 2016. I know that you, by that time, had left. You resigned 31st May.
My last day at the office was 31st May, but I resigned on the 22nd of June 2016.
June 2016,
Yes.
okay. So still, those payments post-date you?
The only payment that was made was a 30.6 million rand payment for the corporate plan, the funding plan. There was I'm not sure if there was a contract, but Mackenzie was paid 70 million to assist Eskom to draft a funding plan, and Regiments got 30 million. So that's 70-30 split, once again.
Yeah, but
Ms. Goodson will, I think also in her testimony, she will provide the commission with evidence as to if work was indeed done by Trillian on that corporate plan or not.
yeah. Does that relate to the first of the 7 items you've listed, which is the Eskom funding plan?
That's correct.
That payment of 30.6
Yes.
million?
Yes.
And you had drafted the funding plan over the weekend. It was found to be not up to
Wanting.
scratch. And you got 30.6 million.
Yes.
Well, not you personally, I'm saying Regiments. Who got
Trillian.
paid? Yeah, who got paid, by the way?
The work was done at Regiments, but Trillian got paid. That is why the former partners, Mr. Litanyonye and Mr. Nevin Pillay, sued Mr. Eric Wood for essentially Regiments did the work and then Trillian got paid. Mr. Chairperson, if I can be indulged, before I go into, can we go back to the section I missed? I think it's quite important.
Denton's report?
The Denton's report.
Yes, okay.
So I think from me,
It's a
so this
what
is
page
page
again?
576,
Yes.
31, Denton's report. Yes, so in October 2015, Mr. Wood gave me a call and he wanted me to meet Mr. Singh at his offices. He didn't tell me what the purpose of the meeting was. So it was quite late in the afternoon. So we had a meeting with Mr. Anuj Singh, Mr. Eric Wood, and myself. And Mr. Singh gave me a copy of the Denton's report. And he asked me if I can make an executive summary on Denton's findings on the Treasury Department. Once again, I was given 24 hours to do this. Yes, so I went back to my office and
Sorry, you were asked to do what with regards to?
to essentially look at the Denton's report,
Yeah.
but only focused on his findings in
to-
relation to the Treasury Department, because there was a section on auditing, there was a section on procurement, there was a section on primary energy, new build. So he wanted just me to focus on the Treasury
Yeah, okay.
area. So I went home and I read the Denton's report and started to make notes. So if we go to page 588.180,
Just repeat the page.
588.180.
Yes.
So this was my executive summary of the events that Denton. So I'm assuming that Denton interviewed the Treasury officials, and so I made an executive summary for Mr. Singh as requested. And so I'll just highlight some of the areas that I looked at. The fact that Treasury had alerted, I think, National Treasury that they were going to run out of funds. And that did not happen. So that's why it's called even Cry Wolf. And essentially, the report says that had Treasury had sufficient forecasting capability, they should have known that because of the delays in Mudube and Kusile, the envisioned cash would not would not come through. So those were one of the factors that they lacked forecasting capabilities. Another one was, after the downgrade, Eskom issued a dollar-denominated bond, and the interest rate was very high. Of course, it had to be because it was reflective of a downgraded credit rating, and there was nothing Treasury could have done about it. And so I made, I think in your own time you can just read the other things I've made, but what is particularly concerning is that after I submitted this, now I'm on paragraph 34 on page 577, that I submitted this, this report to Mr. Singh, and then Mr. Eric Wood eventually told me that Mr. Singh he used this report, amongst other things, to negotiate an exit package for the treasurer, Ms. Caroline Henry, and her sin was she didn't want to work with regiments. So, as we have seen, that part of state capture is essentially you ask an official with integrity to do something that is not within the prescripts or policy, and if they refuse, then you offer them an exit package.
Yeah, well, sometimes you don't have to ask them, let them refuse. If you know that they are people who will not cooperate with your agenda, you try and have them pushed out without asking them to do anything because you know they won't agree.
That's correct. So Ms. Henry's sin was that she did not want to work with regiments.
So
in addition,
what was Ms. Caroline Henry's position?
she was group treasurer at Eskom.
Group treasurer would be immediately below the CFO.
Yes, she reported directly to the CFO,
Mr.
Mr. Anurj Singh.
Oh, okay.
So in addition to that, Eric also, Mr. Wood also said, Mr. Singh is putting undue pressure on Mr. Andre Pillay so that he will rely on regiments more. And so
I'm sorry, Ms. Mutepu, please don't forget what you wanted to say. I don't want us to leave this without me understanding this correctly. Now, what you say in paragraph 32 of your affidavit about what Mr. Wood told you with regard to...
Mr. Chairperson, can you please speak into the microphone?
Oh,
I'm
you
struggling
can't
to
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So usually my voice is very loud and quite audible, so
That's
I'm not used to
unprecedented.
not hearing my voice.
No, I have, I may be young, but I think I have the hearing of a 65-year-old.
Okay. Paragraph 32. You say Mr. Wood told you that Ms. Caroline Henry had resisted working with the regiment's stroke TCP team. And the first thing Mr. Anurj Singh did when he was officially appointed at Eskom was to find ways to get rid of her. My question is whether you were being told this after the event, in other words, after Ms. Henry had been got rid of, or were you being told this before the event?
It was after the event.
It was after the event.
Yes, so Mr. Singh had negotiated an exit package, which Ms. Henry
Yes.
and Mr. Singh was now acting treasurer and CFO.
So he was acting treasurer and CFO at the same time.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
And you were saying that Mr. Wood told you that Mr. Singh had used the Denton, what was said in the Denton's report, to get rid of Ms. Henry.
As ammunition, I think he had other
There may have been other things, but
Yes.
this was one of them.
This was one of them, correct,
Yes.
Mr. Chairperson?
Okay, all right, you can continue.
Yes, so I was saying that Mr. Wood continued to say the reason why Mr. Anuj Singh puts excess pressure on Mr. Andre Pillay was to ensure that he relies on external consultants to assist him. So he wanted to see how Mr. Andre Pillay was amicable to work with Regiments, then Trillian. And if he passed the test, I remember that, then he would be appointed treasurer. But this is by no way of implicating Mr. Andre Pillay. He was not involved in any of the contracting agreements. He was just following his superior's instructions to involve us in the transactions.
Sorry, Ms. Mtepu, the executive summary that you've referred the chairperson to on page 588.180, it has some information that seems to have a bearing on the suspension of the executives. So, I see the first reference in under March 2015.
Can you please repeat your comment or question?
Well, I would like to explain your executive summary insofar as it relates to entries under March 2015.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So March 2015.
Yes.
Is Mr. Chairman, are you there?
Page 588 point what?
180.
180.
180, yes.
Okay. So March 2015, suspension, and later the removal of...
Let me get this right. This is this executive summary from the Denton's report?
Yes, the one that I put together. Remember there was a
Your
Denton's report?
executive summary
Yes, so
of the relevant portion of the Denton's report.
yes, that related to Treasury.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
all right.
So in March 2015, suspension and later the removal of the CEO, pardon me, and 3 senior executives. So if we move to the right, Standard & Poor downgraded Eskom's credit rating, senior management suspensions. Eskom board decision regarding the suspension of the company's CEO and 3 senior executives led S&P, now that's Standard & Poor, to have less confidence in the company's corporate governance arrangements as well as in its standalone credit profile. Subsequently, Eskom's international rating was downgraded to BB+ from BBB-. The national scale ratings, so it's ZA uppercase A / ZA uppercase -2 from ZA AA negative / ZA -1. The downgrade reflected reassessment of Eskom's management and corporate governance to weak from fair.
I see. Go to the very last.
So liquidity, Standard & Poor's less than adequate assessment of Eskom's liquidity reflected the pressure that Eskom faced at the time. Negative working capital, higher capital expenditures, and relatively high dependence on uncommitted sources of funding to support its debt maturity profile.
So this executive summary is an executive summary found...
Just 1 second, Mr. Selector.
Yes, Chair.
Don't forget your next question.
Yes, Chair.
I think we need to talk about what's going to happen. Because you said Ms. Gooderson is already here,
She is here, Chair.
and there was to be another witness for the evening originally, or not?
Not today,
Not today?
not today, Chair.
Okay. How long would you expect Ms. Gooderson to be?
She needs about 3 to 4 hours, Chair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I'm wondering whether we shouldn't rearrange if, because I see we are at nearly 5:45 now
Yes.
with Ms. Mutepu. What's your estimate of how much time you still need with her?
With Ms.
With
Mutepu.
Mhm.
Ms. Mutepu is unpredictable, Chair.
And that's because you're not leading her properly. If you lead her properly, she will be controllable. So,
We should finish within 30 minutes, eh? Yes.
yeah, well, I was hoping 15 minutes.
Oh,
But, so it may well be, it seems to me that maybe we should consider making fresh arrangements with regard to Ms. Gooderson. And if we are going to do that, we may as well do that now so that she can be excused.
yes.
Next week, I don't think that there are any evening sessions that I have approved. And if she would be available, we could look at her coming in next week, one of the evenings, starting from 4 o'clock. Do you want to check how she feels about that, or is she legally represented?
She is represented by the same attorney,
Oh, okay.
Mr. Daniel
Oh,
Witz.
okay.
So fortunately,
How does that sound? Yeah, they should just sanitize, or otherwise, yeah.
I'll keep it on, I'll keep it
Yeah, okay.
on. Chair, I confirm that I represent Ms. Goodson as well. We are flexible with time and we'll fit in with the commission and the chair's time next week regarding an evening session. So you let us know when she needs to be here and she'll be here.
Oh, excellent. No, thank you very much. Why don't we try and fix that now? Let's say she can come and give evidence on Tuesday, 4 o'clock, if that's fine with everybody. Is that fine?
yes,
That's fine.
They're nodding, Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's say that she will come on Tuesday next week, 4 o'clock. There might be, depending on a lot of things, we might end up starting with her at 5, but at least if she's here at 4, if we are able to start at 4, we can start at 4. So otherwise then, if she wishes to be excused now, she's excused.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue then with Ms. Mutepu.
Yes. Ms. Mutepu.
This is not a license that we can take
Correct,
more
Chair.
than we should. Okay, all right.
Ms. Mutepu, you're ready. Yeah, I was asking you, the executive summary. which is here contained in this document we are looking at, it's not an executive summary you created.
It is the executive summary that I created.
Okay, you created this.
Yes, so I got the Denton's report.
Yes,
I read through the treasury areas
yes,
and I put together that executive summary.
I see.
So my sources of information was the Denton's report.
I see.
In addition was the Standard and Poor and Moody's credit rating as well.
Yes.
Yes.
So what are you trying to convey with the information you are presenting in this executive summary? What are you trying to convey?
I was just asked to do it, and
Yes.
essentially he wanted to see what were the challenges at Treasury, what findings did Denton's find, so that he can essentially close any of those gaps and challenges.
So for instance, this is my question. When you're dealing with the suspension of the executives, later removed 3 of the senior executives, the downgrade of Eskom, and I think you repeat again the suspension of the 3 executives. What is the message you're conveying here? Are you identifying this as problem areas in Eskom, or just facts that happened historically, or what?
It was to provide background and context, because one of the alarms that Denton report had said was Eskom's higher cost of funding, and of course you can't divorce that from the fact that the reason why they raised a bond at higher interest rate was because of the credit rating downgrades. So I needed to go back. Why were they downgraded? It was because of the suspension of the managers.
Yeah. If you go to the next page, please, 588.181. There are conclusions there and possible remedial action. That's the heading of those entries. Are those your conclusions?
So thank you for saying that. I gave this executive summary to Mr. Wood, and he's the one who drew up the conclusions and possible remedial action. So that's Mr. Wood's, these bullet points are Mr. Wood's,
Okay.
Conclusions.
So is the position that your summary, executive summary, starts and ends at page 588.180?
That's correct,
And
Mr.
then
Chairperson.
what appears at page 588.181, that is conclusions and possible remedial action, that was what Mr. Wood wrote.
That's correct. Would you like me to
I'll read them.
read them? Or
Yeah.
Would you read them,
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah, read them.
Evidence Leader?
I'll read them for her, Chair. The first bullet point says the above chain of events. The above chain of events, and what does that refer to? Is that the executive summaries, the facts
Yes,
that's outlined there?
this chain of events.
That chain of events.
Yes.
The above chain of events places question marks about the ability of Eskom's treasury sound judgment. So that includes the suspension of the executives, because it's part of the chain of events, the downgrade as a result.
But remember, not necessarily
Not necessarily.
yeah, because Treasury had nothing to do with the decision to suspend, but they were the recipient of a higher cost of funding.
I see.
Yes.
And then the next bullet point, it says, as a direct consequence of full judgment of Eskom treasurer, the series of irreversible consequences places Eskom in unattainable position going forward. Oh, so I remember your explanation. So your explanation was, this document was used in order to get rid of Ms. Caroline Henry.
That's correct, Mr. Chairperson.
This unattainable position, I guess, should have been untenable.
It was drafted by Mr. Eric Wood, so, okay, I will say yes on his behalf.
It can't be unattainable.
Yes.
He must have intended, whatever he had in mind, it should have been untenable, not unattainable. Okay?
Yes, Chair.
So just before you proceed, just for the record,
Yes.
is the position that after Mr. Wood had written his conclusions and possible remedial action, he made that part of the document that contained your executive summary?
That's correct. This,
So it was one document?
it was one document in a PowerPoint presentation form, so this was the
Yes.
last slide.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Mr. Saleh?
Yeah, Chairperson, I'm not going to read further in this document. It ends on page 186. That is 588.
I'm sorry, your voice has gone down.
There we Chair.
Oh.
I was saying I'm not going to read any further. The document ends on page 588.186.
The other,
But I think you can conclude, you can just do those conclusions and remediation. Is it not, the conclusions and possible remedial action, do they go beyond 588.181?
if I can just add clarity,
Yes, please.
this one that starts on page 588.182, that was a draft. So what we are seeing on page 588.180 to 181 was the final document that
Yes.
Mr. Singh,
Yeah.
that Mr. Wood sent to
Yeah.
Mr. Wood. So the other ones were a draft.
Yes. I think you have read the first two bullet points, Mr. Selegat.
Yes.
I think you must read the last three, because then that concludes the conclusions and remedial section
Yes, Chair.
of the remedial action section of the document.
Yeah. The third bullet point reads, in addition, consistent issues are raised by investors, National Treasury, Department of Public Enterprise regarding a lack of timely information and lack of with the required and necessary level of depth, DEPTH. Next bullet point,
1 second. In addition, consistent issues are raised by investors, National Treasury, Department of Public Enterprises regarding a lack of timely information and lack of
I think,
with the required and necessary level of depth. Do you understand the whole of that sentence?
From what my interpretation is that there's concern with regards to first of all, information is not timeous from either National Treasury investors or the Department of Public Enterprise. It lacks the required level of depth. So maybe it's not enough, it doesn't go into sufficient detail to satisfy the investors and the shareholder.
But at least if you are going to criticize somebody else, better get your own act together.
I hope you call Mr. Wood.
Well, if he can be found.
I know where he lives.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
don't say
I
that.
think the investigators,
No, I wasn't going to say.
the investigators note that.
Yes.
I mean, consistent issues, I actually think he must have meant same issues were being raised consistently, not consistent issues.
Yeah, and I think that sentence, Chair, we're grappling with, it has these two words, with the, which should not maybe be the ability to recover from,
Yeah, but if you are going to criticize somebody else to say they are not good in their job, at least what you write should
Indeed.
should reflect that you are better than them. Okay, all right.
The next bullet point, this is critical stakeholder management. Yeah, is therefore sadly lacking.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
This is critical stakeholder management is therefore sadly lacking and places further strain on Eskom's ability to recover from extremely difficult position to which it has found itself in. Yeah.
That's found
At
itself.
least if you criticize somebody, make sure that you get your act together. I mean, you write on a proper, your criticism.
If I can just assist. Remember, we were given 24 hours. So
Yes.
I know Mr. Singh was in such a hurry to get this.
But
So
he was the one.
I suspect that because of that pressure,
But he was the one.
that's a problem. That
If-
because of that pressure, he made
Well,
terrible mistakes, as we can see.
Well, we didn't pick up a number of errors on your section or on your executive summary, but you wrote much more
Yes.
than he wrote. And he wrote, 5 lines? And, yeah, okay, Mr.
The last one, Chair. Treasury has made suboptimal decisions that have adversely affected Eskom, and further inquiry and investigation is required for remedial action.
Yeah,
So it doesn't offer, as it says, possible remedial action
yeah.
at the heading.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Mtepu, then you were about to take us to, you have been now with Regiments. We are in March, or is it February, March?
It's the 31st of March.
Yeah. The chairperson recalled that you have already taken us through how Trillian came into existence. And I think you did say who were the shareholders in Trillian. So that's Mr. Salim Essa and Mr. Eric Wood.
Yes, through his trust, his family trust.
And when you say his family trust, are you referring to Mr. Eric Wood or Mr. Salim Essa?
Mr. Eric Wood.
Mr. Eric Wood. And the percentage of shareholding between the two? Mr.
Issa was 60%. If I stand to be corrected, I think Mr. Wood's family trust was 30%. It was called Zara 1 and Zara 2 Trust. And Mr. Daniel Roy had a smaller percent. I think it was 3%.
I see.
And I'm not sure who the balance of the shareholders were. It was envisioned that it will go to staff.
Okay. So you were then, as you explained in your affidavit, were transferred, I recall now, in your first appearance, you mentioned how there were meetings. Mr. Eric Wood told you about a new venture, a new company to be formed, and you were to be moved from Regiments to that company with Mr. Mohammed Balbert.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, although that changed in regard to
That's
Mohammed
correct,
Balbert,
Mr.
yes.
Chairperson.
So I'm just going through so that we sketch the context. Then you are moved in terms of, you say, the proper section of the Labor Relations Act. You are transferred and taken over by Trillian, and you were appointed. You move over when?
On the 1st of March 2016.
1 March 2016. So Trillian is formed, and Trillian now replaces Regiments at Eskom.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairperson. If I can add to that, Mr. Wood had kept Mr. Anuj Singh abreast with the developments with regards to replacing Regiments with Trillian.
Yes. Now, deal with that replacement. What is it? A replacement objective of Regiments by Trillian. That is as a development partner of McKinsey. Does it happen or not?
It eventually does not happen. If you remember my earlier testimony, Trillian had to be subjected to a global risk review, which Regiments had been subjected to. This global risk review sits in the US, in the United States, where McKinsey is headquartered. So they had requested us to draw up a company profile and our CVs. And I think sometime in January, February, the Global Risk Review had some reservations with regards to the lack of footprint that Trillian had. Even if you did an internet search, it wasn't there. And Mr. Anuj Singh asked if we could be given a little bit more time so that we can quickly put together a company profile. And I think they had appointed a company to have a company website. So it was quite interesting how it was Mr. Singh who was basically pleading on Trillian's behalf that McKinsey just give them an extension. So eventually, on the 31st of March 2016, at one of the steering committees chaired by Mr. Singh, Mr. Andre Pillay was there, Mr. Koko was there. It was official that McKinsey indicated to Mr. Singh that the credit risk review had declined to have Trillian as a supply development partner of McKinsey, obviously because of the lack of footprint. But the red flag was the 60% shareholder, Mr. Salim Issa. He was labeled a politically exposed person, and they did not want to take that risk. So the formal communication was given to all parties that there will be no contractual relationship between McKinsey and its envisioned supply development partner, Trillian.
So the officials at Eskom, senior officials, Mr. Anod Singh, Mr. Machela Koko, you mentioned Edwin Mabelani, Mr. Prish Carpenter, they all knew that McKinsey has declined Trillian to be its supplier development partner.
That's correct. And if I have to go back to that day, Mr. Singh was very unhappy with McKinsey. We were even asked to leave the boardroom and have the Eskom parties deliberate on what are the next steps. So we were in the outside for, I think, an hour or so, and then we were called back. We continued to present, and then I went back to the office and told Eric that the revelations, he was not at the meeting. And then he told me Mr. Singh had communicated Mackenzie's decisions the night prior to the 31st, so he felt no need to attend the steering committee. So I said to Mr. Wood, it means now we have to stop working at Eskom because there is no contract. And he had said to me, no, he will speak to Mr. Singh to find some other way to contract Trillian. And they eventually wanted to look at another partnership with Oliver Weinman, who's another international consultancy firm. So from my high insight, they wanted to have a reputable international consultancy company at the forefront and having a contract with Eskom, and then there'll be a subcontract with Trillian. So it was envisioned that if Mackenzie doesn't want to partner or they've declined Trillian, then I think all other consultancy companies were also, they reached out to them, but I can only find documentation on Oliver Wyman's meeting. It was Mr. Salim Issa and Eric. They forwarded us the points that were discussed. And one of the action points was Mr. Salim Issa would reach out to Mr. Anuj Singh on exploring interest on Shell gas strategy. I'm not sure what that was, but I think those negotiations with Oliver Wyman, they fell through.
Thank you. Do you know whether there is, or did you know
I'm sorry,
there?
before that, I wanted to ask, do we have your statement to the public protector?
I sent it
Do we have
to
it?
the team.
Or then
I'm not sure if it was included.
I think it's your chair.
Let's continue. You can check and then let me know if it's in the bundle, whereabout it is. If it's not, make arrangements to have it included.
Yes, Chair.
I would like to have a look at it.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
So as I understand your evidence is that once McKinsey made the decision that we will not accept Trillian as a supply development partner, Eskom went out to try to bring a different entity by the name of Oliver Wyman.
Oh, Trillian did.
Or Trillian itself did?
Yes.
Oh,
Trillian endeavored to look for other reputable international consultancy firms.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. And did you know that there is a connection at the time? Did you know that there is a connection between Oliver Wyman and Marsh? Remember you mentioned Marsh as the insurance, what did you say they were?
On the Duva 3,
Yes.
Marsh was the insurer, either the insurer or the insurance advisors, I'm not sure.
To Eskom.
To Eskom, correct.
Did you know that
I still don't know today.
the one is a subsidiary of the other?
Okay.
Marsh is a holding company of Oliver Wyman or the other way around.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No, I'm hearing it for the first time today.
Oh. So, 31 March 2016, you hear the news, no partnership between the two. You ultimately resign in June. But from 31 March to the time you resigned, the Trillian continued to render services to Eskom.
Yes, Trillian continued to render services to Eskom, but upon my resignation, no invoice had been submitted, with the exception of the 30 million rand that was for the corporate plan. But that was outside the master service level agreement.
I see.
Yes.
So that's the corporate, the funding plan. In respect of the other services that were rendered, even after this announcement by the announcement by McKinsey, or decision by McKinsey, Trillian did not have an agreement with Eskom to render services
That's correct.
to the time that you left, resigned from Trillian. Now, Ms. Motepu, I think that brings me to the end of my questions to you. I know that you may have other things to say to the chairperson, and I'm going to Sorry, Chairperson, the public protectors, Ms. Motepu's statement to the public protector is in Eskom bundle 14, the same bundle, exhibit U32. Which one is 32? Okay, same. It's on page.
U32 is Ms. Motepo's
That's my statement
here in the
to
commission.
here, but I can forward it to you again.
Page 6.
No, U32 is her affidavit to
Page
the
6.
commission, not to the public protector.
No, page 690. 670. Sorry, I'm looking at it upside down. Chair.
Page 690. Is that what you are saying?
670. Page 670. 670. Up until page 679.
Oh, yes,
Is that the one, Ms. Motepu?
that's the one.
Is that the one that looks like a letter?
No, this is not the right, no, this is not the one.
Which one is this?
Okay.
This one relates to my testimony in December.
Let's continue, Mr. Selega.
Yes,
You
sir.
can do this after and send me information once you are sure.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
this
exactly
one is
where it
my
is to be found.
testimony in December. I will forward it to you again and you can add it on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that brought me to the end of my questions to you. I know that you had asked to say certain things to the chairperson.
Okay, I won't take more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
So subsequently, I left Trillian in June 2016, and I testified at the Badland inquiry. It was the first time that I saw that Trillian had paid, at the time, I think it was 266 million rand. And after that, I was requested by Eskom through their legal attorneys, Bowman Gillifin, to provide us an affidavit because they wanted to have a civil claim to claim back a total of 595 million rand. So I needed to sign a confirmatory affidavit of that Mr. Khadeba's affidavit because he was not there at the time. So I had to read his affidavit and sign a confirmatory affidavit. And then I had to submit my own affidavit.
Is that Mr. Pagamani Khatebe?
Yes, that's correct.
Who was CEO of Eskom?
That's correct. And he was absent when these transactions were happening. So that it wasn't hearsay, I needed to sign a confirmatory affidavit on his behalf. But I think what's most disturbing, Mr. Chairperson, was that, remember if I told you that the transactions were on risk and Trillian would only get paid upon completion?
If the transaction was successful.
Yes, and there was cash in Eskom's bank account. So I received a spreadsheet from Bowman's, which the team that I had left at Trillian. So now they allocated, just for my sake, I think it was sent by Ms. Fahima Bodat to Mr. Prish Kumar. So they had allocated that I had spent 180 days at Eskom. I was not at Trillian. 180 days is 6 months.
Yes.
I was at Trillian for 3 months.
Yes.
Plus, remember, we did not charge Eskom per day or per hour. So it was completely a misrepresentation. It was fabricated. That entire spreadsheet was, I think I told, and they had also inflated the time that my team members had spent on at Eskom. So never did they give me a call and ask me to reconcile. But even if they had asked me to reconcile my time at Eskom, the basis, first of all, there was no contract with Trillian. Number two, the premise of that contract was risk. It was not per hour, per day. So, and what's interesting is that eventually the High Court found that there was a corrupt relationship between Eskom executives and Trillian, and that Eskom executives did everything in their power to benefit Trillian at the expense of Eskom. So the judgment was, and there's a copy of the judgment in my file, but because of lack of time, I won't go into it. So
Yeah,
Trillian
no,
was
no,
ordered
no, no,
to pay 595 million plus interest from the day of payment to the day of judgment.
I will allow you to deal with what you consider to be the main features of the judgment. So, but continue. I just wanted to tell you that I will allow you to do that.
Okay.
The judgment, Chair, is on page 590. Well, it starts on page 589. That's the title page.
80,
Eskom Bundle 14, 14, page 589.
isn't it 586? I have 586.
I have a judgment at, which starts at page 589 in the matter between Eskom Holdings, Soc Limited, applicant and McKinsey and Company, first respondent, Trillian Management, second respondent, and then continues.
Okay. All right.
That should be the judgment.
Okay, I think if we go to my statement, because I just took
You
this.
can't find it there?
No, I can find it.
Oh.
But in my statement, I copied the important parts.
Okay, let's
So
go to
for
your
the
statement,
for the sake of time,
Yeah,
let's go back to 587,
yeah.
paragraph 99. And if you can indulge me, I will just read the judgment. The High Court ruled that there was no contract, so there was nothing to say about the contract. But the payments were unlawful, irregular, and Trillian Capital Partners had to pay back to Eskom the entire 595 million plus interest. In the scathing judgment, 3 judges, Faru J, Bakwa J, and Soka J, ruled that the cancer of corruption can be eradicated, and those who benefit from ill-gotten gains will be deprived of such gains. They continued, in the present matter, where the probabilities are apparent that senior officials of Eskom could leave no stone unturned to the benefit of Trillian Capital Partners, where confidential information belonging to Eskom was leaked to Trillian Capital Partners, where senior personnel of Eskom who were expected to display the conduct of the utmost good faith and to act in the best interest of Eskom, where there appears to be a corrupt relationship between Eskom's senior personnel and the directors of Trillian Capital Partners. Justice and equity demand nothing less than the monies paid to TCP unjustifiably to be returned to Eskom.
Yes, thank you.
I think I will end on that note.
I thought I interrupted you about the judgment while you had something.
Yes, I'm saying that,
You preferred it to end on this note.
well, plus, no, I can actually say that I was also requested to be Mr. Machala Kwakwa's first witness in his disciplinary. When he was in Parliament in, I think, 2018, he said he played no role in the contracting of Trillian. He doesn't know. But I was contacted once again by Bowman's Gillifin, they had imaged Mr. Gogo's emails and they found our correspondence, which obviously contradicts his version that he gave to Parliament under oath. So one of his charges was that he misled Parliament, and he said he played no role. But the truth was, as you've seen from my testimony today, him and Mr. Singh were central figures in the negotiation of Mackenzie and Trillian. In addition, they added more initiatives.
Initiatives.
Yes, but unfortunately, Mr. Gogo, I remember I was having coffee waiting to be called, and the attorneys called and said at the council chambers that Mr. Gogo had resigned, I think 15 minutes before we were supposed to start, and it was with immediate effect. But Eskom wanted to continue with the disciplinary, so I had to wait for an hour or so, but the legal opinion was, if it's immediate effect, that employer-employee relationship no longer ceases, and Eskom doesn't have a right to discipline him. Yes.
Yeah. Of course, an employer who wants to know what happened, there is no reason why they can't continue with the inquiry, even if it's no longer called a disciplinary inquiry, and find from the witnesses what had happened so that it knows the truth. But I see that you do say, you have just repeated that, you say in paragraph 90 of your affidavit that you were able or are able to provide 5 emails. Have you provided those emails to the commission?
Those are the emails that I was reading earlier on.
Or the ones that we
Yes,
went to?
that's correct.
1082 and 1056
Yes.
were 2 of them.
So yes, the forensic people that Bowman Gillifin appointed, they mirrored Mr. Gogo's emails.
Yes.
So they presented me with those emails.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so,
Okay.
yes, so
Okay.
the ones that I read were
Yes.
essentially what the 5 emails that they indicated
But
here.
here you say 5. We saw 2. Were there 3 that we didn't go to?
No, I think in one day I sent 3. There was the 5th of December. No, there was 30th of November, and then there was the 5th of December, and then there was the 7th of December.
I just want to make sure that if you say there are 5, we do have all 5.
I suspect we even have more than 5.
Chair, I will confirm that.
Yeah.
There's an email on the 30th, that's the 1st of November 2015. That's one, I think they are 5.
Okay. You can check later on and confirm.
Yeah, I think they are 5. There's then other emails, 4 of them sent on the 7th of December.
Okay, all right.
There was another one on the 5th of December.
The 5th.
It was 30th, 5th, and 7th.
Yes, but I'll check.
Yes, okay.
because they are
But
here.
I take it that when you were going to give evidence in Mr. Gogo's disciplinary hearing, a statement had been taken from you by somebody which was going to be used to guide your evidence.
That's correct. I think I may
Is it with the legal team?
I will resend, but I sent them my final statement.
That was
That was
submitted to the
yes.
disciplinary hearing?
The senior counsel was senior counsel advocate, the Tembek guy.
Toby.
Yes.
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 But are you saying?
I
you
will
have
double check
submitted
if I
to them?
sent it, but I still have it with me, so I will
Okay.
send the
Yeah.
public protector's statement and my statement that I was due to make.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
No, that's fine. And has at least this part of, or the portions of Ms. Motepo's affidavit that relate to Mr. Gogo, have they been sent to him by way of 3 notices?
Yes, they have, Chairperson.
They have?
They
Okay,
have.
all right.
Yes.
Okay, so if and when you get the others, the statements that she's talking about, if those have not been sent to him,
We'll also sent.
they should also be sent insofar as they relate to him.
Yes, yes, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay, all right. So you said you had completed what you wanted to say.
Yes, on the Eskom part, yes. I have
Yes, you have,
something else
Yeah.
on the
Yes.
Transnet.
yeah,
I have a file here. In October 2018, I was requested by Transnet to assist them with an affidavit on the club loan. And I saw testimony from Mr. Petuloramo Subudi that Trillian Asset Management played a role there and there were BEE. My file is here with my version. I'll give it to Advocate Seleka and he can give it to the evidence leader.
yeah,
I think
for Transnet.
Myberg, Advocate
Yeah.
Myberg.
Yes.
Yes.
But you keeping a copy of your
No,
own?
this is my copy, so I'll
Okay.
ask the
Make sure that a copy is made, you retain
yes.
your originals, so that
Mm.
in case something happens to it, we don't. But thank you very much for wanting to assist the Commission in regard to that as well. That's quite important. So you'll make arrangements. I just don't want her to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
We'll
understand.
make arrangements so they can
Yes.
make copies and then hand over to Mr. Myberg.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you. Okay. We are done. Eh?
We are done then for today, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Ms. Goodson has been excused until Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we have scheduled Mr. Brian Molefe,
Yeah.
as well as Ms. Viroshni Naidu
Yes, for the evening
for the
session.
evening session.
I think we must try and move Ms. Naidu to next week, if that is possible, as well. Explore that and see if, for example, we could look at Wednesday,
Okay.
but there is flexibility, evening session.
Yes.
Explore that, only if maybe there would be challenges to having her testify next week, then we can see whether tomorrow evening we can do that. But my inclination is we might take quite long with Mr. Brian Molefe. So explore whether she would be, Ms. Naidu would be available on one of the evenings next week.
Yes, sir.
And if she would be available Wednesday or Thursday,
Yes.
let's explore that.
I will do so with the
Yeah.
head legal team.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutepu. You are now excused. Thank you once again for coming to assist the Commission. We are now going to adjourn for the day, and tomorrow we'll continue at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.